On the surface, he is a one-handed S-class hunter. In reality, he is an alien who only wants to retire. Little Green is the strongest magician on a planet of magical civilization. But one day, he suddenly had an idea, which was to quit this damn job. Because this is a society of free services. Even if you work to death, you won't earn a penny. What's even worse is, due to advanced technology, they don't need to eat, drink, or sleep at all. On standby 24 hours a day. So, at a young age, he developed overtime addiction. He can't even remember when was the last time he got off work on time. He wanted so much to just walk away. But because of his heavy responsibilities, he couldn't leave at will. And those high-ranking figures, to prevent him from escaping, even placed restrictions on him. For example, when he tried to use teleportation, his head would get electrocuted. Even if he could barely escape, there's no hiding place on this planet. He had also thought about getting rid of his boss, but unfortunately, he couldn't attack anyone from the same planet. Not only that, he couldn't even commit suicide. And just when he was filled with thoughts of resignation, a sudden flash of inspiration struck him. Although his body was bound by magic, his soul was free. Because, in this world, there is no magic that controls souls. In other words, as long as he gives up his body, he can escape with his soul. And so, 10 years passed. Little Green struggled every day between persistence and giving up. After countless attempts, he completed the unique magic of soul manipulation. He wanted to separate his soul, and then escape to a planet where no one can find him. At the moment his consciousness left his body, he couldn't help but feel overjoyed that he succeeded. I did it. I really am a genius. I can finally leave this damn place. Let's see what you bastards will do now. With the excitement of quitting, Little Green arrived on a blue planet deep in the universe. When he opened his eyes again, he had already become a human. From now on, he is the male lead. Although he felt a bit out of place at first, Little Green was very satisfied with this outcome. After all, he successfully retired. Right? Next, he first felt the state of this body. Then he prepared to accept the original owner's memories, so that he could smoothly integrate into this society in the future. He needed to disguise himself to the extent that even this body's parents wouldn't notice. The plan was perfect. Reality is harsh. The memories of this body were like fragments, disjointed. He couldn't remember at all. Meanwhile, a sudden sharp pain shot through his abdomen. A wave of sour liquid kept surging from his stomach. Damn it, I didn't expect. This body was actually starving to death. Before coming here, he only thought about finding a race with the highest intelligence and the most vigorous body. But he actually overlooked the current state of the body. This was a huge mistake. To survive, he must quickly eat something to fill his stomach. So he had to struggle to get up and walk outside. Then he saw sunlight for the first time. The surface of his homeland was mostly liquid, a pitch-black place without sunlight. And now, a colorful world was presented before his eyes. Whether it's the warm sunlight or the refreshing air, both fascinated him. He really wanted to experience it more, if it weren't for the fact that he was starving to death right now. But why is there nothing edible around? If this goes on, I will really starve to death. Just then, the protagonist finally found something to eat. The little guy, although not big. But the problem is, this is not the time to be picky. So the little bug was caught with a confused look, and then got closer to a huge mouth. At this critical moment, a child passed by the protagonist. Looking at what the child had in his mouth, the protagonist instantly felt that the little bug in his hand was no longer appealing. He casually tossed it aside. So, Now, there is an important question. Should I snatch it or not? Forget it, I'll just follow for now. So the protagonist followed closely behind. The child also noticed someone following him. He turned around to look, and was startled by the other person the next moment. Without a moment's hesitation, he turned and ran, completely ignoring the protagonist's plea to wait a moment. In the end, the child skillfully escaped with his agility, while the protagonist was left wondering where he had followed to. But fortunately, there were a few pots of ornamental plants here. Although they didn't look very edible, the protagonist couldn't care less at this point. However, just then, a sudden rumble came from afar, accompanied by a child's scream. It was that child from earlier. Although he didn't know what had happened, the protagonist decided to go take a look. At this moment, the child was trembling all over, looking ahead, because a giant bird was standing in front of him. A strange creature. The man had never seen a woman in his life, because he was an alien who had just crossed over. Just now, the protagonist heard a scream, so he looked in the direction of the sound, and saw a giant bird chasing after the boy. Unexpectedly, on his first day on Earth, he encountered such a creature on the street. This really is a messed up world. However, soon, the protagonist changed his mind. In a way, this might be a good thing, because, according to the residual memories of this body, birds are a delicious delicacy. A mere monster is nothing to a great magician. As long as he adapts to the magic power, conquering this planet won't be a problem. Just then, he suddenly discovered that his body was surrounded by glowing lights. This feeling of all the cells being swept over is magic power. But what is with this amount? Isn't it just too much? If we say that in his hometown, the magic power could only reach his feet, then here, the excess is like falling into a swimming pool. At this moment, the protagonist felt invigorated. In such a magic-rich place, he would be capable of anything. And just then, the boy ran in front of the protagonist to seek help. Such a thing for a great magician is a piece of cake. However, the protagonist has one condition, which is to take what the boy has in his hand. Although the boy was somewhat reluctant, upon hearing the noise behind him, he instantly understood the gravity of the situation. Here, take it, please. Save me. The deal was struck. The protagonist told the boy to hide behind him first, and then got into position, waving his hand, intending to separate the monster's flesh from its bones. But after waiting for a long time, nothing happened. At this moment, the boy looked at the protagonist as if he were an idiot. And the protagonist also had some doubts about this. What's going on? Could it be because he just arrived and is too nervous? Seeing the protagonist's outward strength was just a facade, the boy, sensing danger, decisively fled. Meanwhile, the protagonist was still trying various things. Explosion type, fire spirit type, curse type. He tried all kinds of magic. In the end, he could only come to one conclusion. This body actually cannot use magic. Realizing the reality, the protagonist began to flee in panic, running while shouting for help. Unfortunately, even though he was on the street, there was no one to help. And for some reason, the monster was fixated on him alone. His already starving body was now pushed to the limit, running down the main road. But the male lead decisively changed direction, and the monster was not far behind, also making a sharp turn. Worse still, the monster suddenly remembered it could fly, looking at the giant bird diving towards him from behind. The male lead felt like he might die on his first day in this world. It seemed he was about to meet his end. And at this critical moment, his knee unexpectedly twisted. In that instant, he seemed to see his great-grandmother. The next moment, he was thrown to the ground by inertia, and the giant bird flew straight over his head. Then came a series of death rolls. Finally, the monster's massive beak crashed hard into the wall. The male lead watched the feathers flying everywhere. And for a moment, he couldn't react to what had happened. Then he stepped forward to check. Looking at the enormous body that lay still, he couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Could it be that he died from crashing into the wall? Is this guy an idiot? I really want to ask the scholars on Earth. How could such a stupid creature evolve? But now is not the time to think about these things. The male lead touched his already starving belly and involuntarily drooled. This bird should be edible, right? After all, they are all creatures from the same planet. Their body compositions are similar. However, before he could figure out how to start eating it, he suddenly heard a noise behind him. The male lead turned his head to look and saw a capable-looking woman in professional attire appearing right in front of him. It turned out the boy had gallantly gone to seek help. Zhu Yuyan is a professional hunter, so she knew what that monster was. A Fikino killer, a type of bird that lives in desert areas. From the space gate, it possesses speed comparable to a missile. Hunters below C rank are no match for it. So before there are large casualties, he must resolve this as soon as possible. However, when he found his way here, what he saw was such a scene at this moment. He was somewhat questioning his life. Is this something he can solve alone? Just then, the boy and a police officer also arrived. The officer thanked the male lead for helping to catch the monster, while Zhu Yuyan squatted down to examine the cause of the monster's death. It looked like it had been killed from the front. Could it be that this person is a C-rank hunter or above? The male lead didn't care about anything else. At the moment he saw the boy, he had already forgotten everything else. He reached out a hand, seriously, looking at the other person, and said, "You didn't forget our agreement, did you?" Hearing this, the boy, although reluctant, still handed over what he had to the male lead. And the male lead drank it without hesitation. At that moment, he finally felt alive again. Zhu Yuyan looked at this scene with a speechless expression. Is this stealing a child's snack? The man clearly dealt with a monster, yet almost got invited for tea. Just because he didn't have a monster-killing qualification certificate? Just now. The Hunter Associations. Zhu Yuyan reached out to express her gratitude to the male lead. Then the male lead, without any courtesy, extended that hand covered in unknown liquid and shook it. Zhu Yuyan instantly felt dirty, not caring about manners anymore. She took out a tissue and started wiping her hands. At the same time, she asked him to show his hunter's license, because she needed to report to the association. But the male lead had never even heard of that thing. So he randomly made up an excuse, saying he didn't have it right now. Hearing this, Zhu Yuyan didn't say much, and asked him to state his name, so she could check with the hunter system. Who would have thought the male lead looked guilty, just because he didn't even know the name of this body? Seeing the other person's expression, Zhu Yuyan first fell into silence. Then, incredulously, she asked the male lead, "Did you not register as a hunter? And what about the awakening test? You should know that without registration, using abilities casually is considered illegal." The male lead completely couldn't understand what the other person was saying, but he knew that this was not going well. So he lied, saying he had of course registered. He just forgot his hunter's license at home. Then he told her to wait here, while he went home to get it. After saying that, he didn't wait for her to respond, and directly turned around to leave. At the same time, he secretly made a decision in his heart to never walk this path again. The male lead returned home and successfully found his ID card. But no matter what, he couldn't find his hunter's license. As expected, the original body indeed had not registered. Additionally, he discovered some unknown items at home. And it was at this moment that he remembered the original body was actually a smoker. In that instant, the male lead was almost infuriated. You have to know, smoking is a big taboo for a magician. Because magicians need to perceive and absorb external magical energy through their respiratory system, so doing something that harms their lungs is simply unimaginable for them. No wonder this body couldn't use magic. At this moment, the male lead felt a bit regretful. Why didn't he think of it? To eliminate the defective body. But he quickly cheered up again. After all, he had gone through so much to escape. He couldn't give up over such a small matter. A happy and fulfilling life was still waiting for him. Then, just a few hours after arriving on Earth, he was arrested, simply because he was starving when he went out again. After finally smelling food, he found a restaurant to have a hearty meal. And then he was arrested for dining and dashing without money. Fortunately, he was recognized by a police officer as the hunter who had just dealt with the monster and was let go. The male lead was very grateful for the officer's help. After bowing to thank him, he prepared to leave. And before leaving, the officer took out a flyer and handed it to the male lead. It turned out the officer noticed that the male lead had not registered as a hunter. So kindly, he reminded him to go to the Hunter Association to undergo a free awakening test. Although the male lead still didn't know what awakening was, he could tell from the other person's expression that this should be common knowledge for Earthlings. So he decided to go check it out first. Then he remembered that the original body had been here before. But the original body had only awakened to the lowest level as rank. Thinking of this, the male lead felt a thunderbolt strike him. And just as the male lead was in a daze, he was suddenly interrupted by a voice. It turned out to be Zuan Yuyan, who had just returned to the association after dealing with the monster. He happened to see the male lead, so he approached to greet him. He was curious about what the male lead was doing there. And he also wanted to take a look at the other person's hunter license. Only then did the male lead remember. He had just lied to the other person about going home to get his documents. Fortunately, he had regained some of his memories. So the male lead apologized to him and admitted that he had lied. In fact, he did not have a hunter license. Zuan Yuyan looked speechless. No wonder he waited for so long and still didn't see you return. Then the male lead explained next. He had already registered for awakening. It's just that his level was too low. So I didn't apply for a hunter license. Zuan Yuyan was a bit confused. The male lead proudly said, I'm F rank. Upon hearing this, Zuan Yuyan was instantly shocked. What? How did you deal with the Fikino killer? Then he heard the male lead say, that stupid bird crashed into a wall and died. The answer was too bizarre. The atmosphere fell into silence for a moment. Although this isn't impossible, Zuan Yuyan couldn't help but feel a bit skeptical. After all, looking at the other person's eyes at that time, it was as if he was looking at a bug. This is not the behavior of an F-rank loser. But if he was lying, then why hide himself? You should know. Usually, those who do this are dangerous individuals. Could it be that this person is also confused? Zuan Yuyan finally smiled and said he understood. You're really lucky. The Fikino killer just wasn't smart. Looking at the forced smile on the other person's face, the male lead instantly understood. Earthlings express emotions by controlling their facial muscles. This is something he needs to learn. Well, then the male lead's lips slowly curled up. Yeah, I really am lucky. This smile looked full of criminal intent. Zuan Yuyan was dumbfounded. This guy really has a problem, right? The man was just giving a simple smile, but it scared the woman across from him almost to death. It turns out the male lead was imitating the girl. The previous smile was forced and insincere. Zuan Yuyan felt that this person had issues. It's better to leave safely first. But before that, he took out a bill from his pocket and handed it to the male lead. Little Green was thrilled to receive payment for the first time in his life. Where did this good person come from? But he was still curious. Why? In response, Zuan Yu Yan provided an explanation. It turns out, this was a share from the corpse of that Fikino killer. I didn't expect that thing could be sold for money. Tears of excitement flowed from the male lead's mouth. He didn't understand why that bird was so valuable. Could it be the feathers are expensive? Unbeknownst to him, what was truly valuable was the magic box. A C-grade magic box is worth 2 million. The male lead couldn't just ignore this. He immediately questioned why he only got 50,000. Upon hearing this, Zuan Yu Yan looked helpless. After all, the losses caused by fighting the monster at that time were compensated in his name. And if someone hadn't run away, they could have received a hunter's exemption. At that moment, the male lead felt a sharp pain in his chest. He awkwardly apologized to the other party. And Zuan Yu Yan seemed to have heard something unbelievable. Then he turned and left. He said it's okay as he walked away. Have a nice afternoon. Looking at the other person's departing figure, the male lead couldn't help but grip the cash in his hand. I didn't expect that in his hometown. Those annoying guys are like flying insects. It's actually worth 2 million. And to enjoy life on Earth, he needs a large sum of money. So at this moment, the male lead is determined to become a hunter. To be honest, until just now, he couldn't see the future. Because the original body was just too poor. He couldn't even afford a bowl of soup. But now it's different. Because he knows hunters can make money. In that case, from now on, let's rely on magic to hunt for a living. Although he can't use magic right now, the male lead is thinking about where to find monsters. Then he immediately hears people around him discussing that a dimensional gate has opened there. So he follows the crowd's gaze. Sure enough, he sees in mid-air a vortex of space emitting special magical fluctuations. So there are monsters inside. It seems he needs to analyze this. But there are just too many people. It's inconvenient. Without a hunter's license, he can't go in. And he doesn't know if there are any others nearby. Suddenly, the male lead is taken aback. He senses a familiar aura. If nothing unexpected happens, there should be another dimensional gate nearby. So the male lead climbs a big mountain following the aura. The journey is quite smooth. Except for his poor physical condition. He almost collapsed from exhaustion. Looking at the yellow tape blocking his way, the male lead doesn't know what this is. He just feels that the aesthetic standards of Earthlings need improvement. Then he swaggered over, walking towards the dimensional gate. Not long after, the male lead disappeared. Another team arrived here. Because this dimensional gate has been frequently mutating recently, they came to investigate the reason. As the group delves deeper, they haven't seen a single monster around. This not only didn't raise their alertness, but even the reminder from the grade hunter and Runsheng in the team wasn't taken seriously. And soon, they paid the price for their ignorance. On the other side, the male lead has entered a deep position in the empty gate. But he hasn't encountered a single monster either. This left the male lead somewhat puzzled. Could it be that his understanding of the empty gate is flawed? Just then, he suddenly sensed a wave of magical energy. This small but vibrant amount of magic comes from humans. In other words, someone has entered here. Following the magical energy wave, he arrived behind a large rock. Then he saw the scene before him. Just moments ago, there was a team of 4. But now only 3 remain. This scene stunned the other 2 guys. Seeing this, and Runsheng loudly reminded the 2. If you don't want to die, get your act together. However, before he finished speaking, he felt a chill coming from behind. At the critical moment, and Runsheng quickly raised his shield to create a barrier, blocking this fatal blow. Then he slammed down hard on the ground, using the force to leap high into the air. Immediately after, with lightning speed, he kicked fiercely at the stone creature. When everything calmed down, The stone creature had turned into a pile of rubble. The other two looked at this scene in shock. No wonder he isn't a great hunter. Although he is a defensive type. And Ruishing ignored the two's flattery, telling them to hurry up and clean up the bodies and leave. However, soon, he felt another chill coming from behind. This time he couldn't react in time, and was directly grabbed. Then he was thrown away like a bug. Another man in the team looked at this scene in shock, and the next moment, the stone monster's attack came at him. The man immediately swung his sword at the opponent, but it was just a mere touch. His sword broke into two pieces. What followed was, he was sent flying by a punch. This scene directly stunned the last woman, facing the stone man's incoming fist, actually forgot to run. Fortunately, at the critical moment, and Ruishing blocked this blow for him. And now is the best opportunity to use binding magic. If they can't trap him here, they will be completely wiped out. However, at this extremely critical moment, this woman actually abandoned her teammates and ran away alone. Can you believe that after aliens arrived on Earth, the first time participating in a dungeon, they fully realized what humanity is? Not long ago, the male lead entered an empty gate alone, and then hid aside to watch an adventure team being attacked by monsters. He saw one of the women was about to meet her end on the spot. Fortunately, her teammates appeared just in time to block this fatal blow. Originally, this was the best time to use binding magic. If they don't control the monster here, they will be completely defeated. But who would have thought? At this extremely critical moment, he actually ran away alone. At that moment, the man's eyes were filled with disbelief. Then, as expected, the man was punched to the ground by the monster. In the last moments before consciousness faded, and Ruishing only felt an emptiness in his heart. He had once awakened and a great talent by luck, but rejected many large guild invitations, and then found a few good people to form a team. He thought everything would go smoothly. Who would have thought the final outcome would be so tragic? Seeing the opponent about to log off, the male lead finally stood up. Thanks to the efforts of the other party just now, he finally completed the analysis. Don't be fooled by how scary this guy looks right now. But in fact, he is just an old-style golem. The so-called golem is a type of puppet powered by magic. In the male lead's planet, Alpha House, golems do all sorts of things, from sweeping, running errands, to moving bricks, to war puppets. There's everything. Their planet can be said to be a country built with golems as labor, and the male lead's specialty happens to be weapon golems. However, even though he speaks with confidence, dealing with them is not easy at all. Don't be fooled by this guy's bulky body and slow attacks. But the male lead's body is just too weak. After a few more hits, he feels he can't take it. However, he ultimately sees the opportunity, because the large gem on the golem's arm is actually a magic recognition sensor. As long as he can input the stop command into the sensor, he can make it stop. Although generally, golems, only their master and creator know the emergency stop command. This model is too old. The male lead knows without looking. Thus, as the male lead writes the stop command, the huge golem immediately loses power and falls to the ground. Of course, this is not enough. To completely shut it down, he must remove the core from its back. Then the male lead begins to take action. Of course, this small task poses no pressure at all. Looking at the object in his hand, the male lead can't help but feel it's very simple. When Ruishing opens his eyes again, what he sees is the male lead's moment of showing off. What happened? Did he defeat the monster by himself? At this moment, in Ruishing's eyes, the male lead has already taken on the image of a master. Seeing the other party wake up, The male lead jumps down from the monster and then walks towards him. Seeing this, Enruishing is scared to the point of breaking out in a cold sweat. Because in this situation, it's easy to be silenced. But no matter how he struggles, his body can't move. Yet the male lead quickly comes to his side, looking down at him. Enruishing thought he was done for. But to his surprise, the other party reached out a hand to him. Then he asked if he needed help. Just like that, Enruishing, who successfully survived from a V-level or higher dungeon, received widespread media attention. But he wasn't happy at all, because he knew it was all that person's credit. However, the Hunter Association people wanted to attribute this credit to him, although they also know that someone else killed the monster. Who could blame Enruishing for not even knowing the other party's name? If the other party is truly a hunter stronger than Enruishing, he has no reason not to be recognized, unless that person is not registered at all. So no matter how much Enruishing opposes, the people from the association urged him to accept it. Otherwise, it would affect his image. But no matter how they persuaded him, Enruishing wanted to honestly say it, because it is the most basic respect for that hunter. In the end, the association people understood his determination and stopped persuading him, allowing him to leave. Although the glasses guy wanted Enruishing to take the credit, he also hoped to meet him. This powerful and upright hunter is currently the male lead they are thinking about. As he opens the door to a new world, he is deeply fascinated by using a smartphone for the first time. Earthlings are simply divine. Since he accidentally unlocked the phone last night, he hasn't stopped. Everything on it captivates his attention. This is the paradise he has been hoping for. Thanks to the smartphone, the male lead easily obtained the information he wanted. He learned that entering a void gate requires following a strict hierarchy, and that awakeners wanting to enter a void gate must register as hunters with the Hunter Association. At the same time, he also learned that the previous guy was actually a level 1. But other matters need to be set aside for now. Because for him, the most important thing right now is to obtain a hunter's license. Clearly, others are crossing over in a world of luxury and indulgence, enjoying life. But for the male lead, he almost starved to death. In order to survive smoothly, the male lead had to sign up. And the first thing after registering as a hunter was to join others in receiving safety education about the void gate. The male lead listened boredly from the side, summarizing that it was basically not to be too cocky in front of monsters. After the safety education was completed, the staff distributed devices to everyone. The male lead looked at the item in his hand with confusion, not understanding what it was. He didn't expect that in this era, there would still be people who didn't recognize this thing. Others mocked him, asking if he was an alien. The male lead, listening from the side, broke out in a cold sweat. What's going on? Has my identity as an alien been exposed? The staff told the male lead, this is a popular analysis device. Then they explained how to use it. Once everyone had their devices, the educator, a young lady, instructed everyone to point the camera at the butterfly in the air. The male lead followed the command and took a shot. And immediately, the monster's level name appeared on the screen. It turns out, Earthlings use this to identify their enemies. In addition, the staff also told the male lead that this analyzer can not only analyze monsters, but also detect equipment. Upon hearing this, the male lead immediately pointed it at the staff, but nothing showed up. It seems this person is not valid. Then the male lead started using it on a nearby plant, and it really displayed information. But when he pointed it at the ground, the male lead didn't understand why. Could it be that this thing can only identify items with magical power? It distinguishes items based on whether they have magical power, to determine if the items are useful. Although it's very convenient, the accuracy is not high. After all, some things are very useful even without magical power. They are still quite useful. For example, this ordinary soil is a typical example, because soil can be used to make the rarite magic absorption agent. But looking at the situation, it seems no one here knows this. In a world where magic engineering has developed slightly, it is impossible not to know about magic absorption agents. Suddenly, the male lead had a flash of inspiration. The next moment, he called out to the staff, "I want to ask you something." The staff encouraged him to go ahead and ask. And the male lead did not hesitate at all, and asked the question that was on his mind. When did magic awakeners first appear? Upon hearing this, the staff answered without any hesitation, giving the correct answer. Of course, it was 7 years ago. One day, 7 years ago, various awakeners appeared all over the world at the same time. The male lead listened to this answer in disbelief. What? Only 7 years? You have to know. The history of magic in Alpha House exceeds 60,000 years. So I have been living with a group of primitives. Thinking of this, the male lead couldn't help but shed tears. He just said, "How is that possible? Only electronic engineering has made a leap in development." But speaking of which, even if he used the magic absorption agent, no one would know, right? Hunters have always been a high-paying group indulged in luxury in the media. But unlike the fantasies of ordinary people, the life of low-level hunters is simply hell. Moreover, the body the male lead is inhabiting has a problem with one leg. And now, he can't use magic. So he must find a job before starving to death. To deal with monsters, the male lead obtained many magic absorption agents. And on this earth, there are indeed monsters that can be killed with this. The problem is that the monster lives in a C-level dimensional gate. The mere F-level male lead has no qualification to enter. Having just arrived on Earth, he is still very unfamiliar with everything, and cannot engage in the magic absorption agent business. This is a bit uncomfortable. Just then, the phone suddenly vibrated violently. It startled the male lead. The male lead picked up his phone to take a look. It turned out to be a disaster warning. A B-level monster has appeared. Everyone is advised to quickly take shelter. How is that possible? At a time like this, of course, you choose to go out and see the excitement. The male lead got dressed and went out to the street. He saw the crowd around him fleeing in panic. Not far ahead, on the TV tower, a huge B-level monster was roaring at the sky. Of course, there were also some fearless people watching, and a warning line had already been set up around. Just then, the male lead was suddenly bumped into. The person who bumped into him not only didn't apologize, but complained that the male lead was in the way. The male lead looked at the other person with a dark expression. The other person thought he wanted to fight. However, the male lead didn't understand what that meant at all. "I was just looking at you." Seeing that the male lead looked quite fierce, the blonde guy's attitude improved a lot. He stated that he was a hunter, and reminded the male lead to keep his distance. The male lead, unwilling to back down, stated that he was also a hunter. The blonde guy asked what level the male lead was. Then he heard the male lead say F level. Upon hearing this, the blonde guy almost died laughing. "Ha ha ha, what a piece of trash." The male lead looked at the other person in confusion. What is this guy laughing about? The man is clearly just an F-level hunter. Who would have thought he actually has an A-level fanboy? Just now, a monster suddenly appeared in the city center. The bored male lead decisively went forward to join the excitement. To prevent the monster from harming ordinary citizens, the military deployed helicopters in an attempt to stop it. However, their attacks on the monster could only be considered a tickle, and the monster merely flicked its tail casually. turning the helicopter into a huge fireball as it fell. Fortunately, at this moment, the support hunters finally arrived. Seeing that two ordinary people were about to fall into the monster's mouth, one hunter jumped directly from the helicopter, and with one slash, severed its huge tongue. In an instant, the monster let out a painful roar. Then he turned around and fled without hesitation. At this time, another hunter aimed at the target, drawing his bow. In the next moment, two arrows accurately struck the monster's tail. Seeing the situation was dire, the monster, being a giant lizard, decisively severed its tail to survive. But now it wants to run. It's obviously too late. One could see the male lead's old acquaintance, and Runsheng, jumping directly from the plane. Then, with immense force, he kicked hard on the monster's back. The monster fell from midair to the ground, and Runsheng gave the opponent no chance to catch their breath. With a powerful strike, he hit the monster's belly again. Just like that, with only 2 hits, the monster that had just been showing off lay motionless on the ground. Seeing the performance of the professional hunters, the crowd watching was excited, their eyes sparkling. After dealing with the monster, the few of them walked towards the direction of the male lead. Recently, the male lead learned something. That is, extreme hunters have become the backbone of this world. That's why everyone likes them so much. Just like now, everyone is so excited they could turn into sycophants. However, this very person, upon seeing the male lead for the first time, immediately grabbed his hand and looked at the male lead with admiration like a little fanboy. He greeted the male lead, and just thinking about how the other person dealt with the golem in a different dimension, and Runsheng felt he was simply incredibly cool. The blonde guy who previously looked down on the male lead now looked at the male lead with the face full of cold sweat. What the hell is going on? Could he be a big shot? Seeing this kid sneak, peeking frequently, and Runsheng glared at him with a dark expression, asking the male lead if he was his friend. Seeing this, the blonde guy was almost scared to death, stammering for a long time without saying a word. However, in the blink of an eye, Runsheng ignored him and happily introduced himself to the male lead, handing over his business card. Of course, he also casually asked for the male lead's name. Next, Runsheng invited the male lead into the small woods. Of course, don't get the wrong idea. He just wanted to repay the male lead's life-saving grace, and coincidentally, the male lead had something he needed help with. So he took out his phone, pointing to a location on the map, and said, "Can you enter the dimensional gate with me?" Soon, the two entered a seemingly desolate dimensional gate. Till now, Runsheng still couldn't quite believe it, that a hunter as strong as the male lead was actually just an F rank. It turned out that just now, the male lead had already revealed his true level to the other person. But how could this be possible? Runsheng suspected that the measuring device was broken. However, he quickly imagined the truth. Because awakened ones above intermediate level are required to participate in dungeons, semi-forced. So some people who are unwilling to be manipulated by the association will fabricate false awakening values. And in Runsheng's eyes, there's no doubt that the male lead is one of those people. The two advanced through the dungeon. Soon, the male lead found the target of their journey. It was a group of bat-like monsters, and Runsheng was curious about what the male lead would do. As a result, he saw the male lead take out a handful of dirt and throw it into the sky. In the next moment, one by one, the bats turned into fireballs and fell. The effect of the magic absorption agent was simply immediate. However, seeing this scene, Runsheng had a question. That is, since it was clearly a problem that could be solved barehanded, why did he have to use a tool? To this, the male lead was quite speechless. Does this kid think the hunter's license is something you can just look at with your toes? but Runsheng suspected that the male lead had been at the top for too long and had forgotten the ecological environment of lower-level hunters. Seeing the other person's expression, the male lead understood that no explanation would help. In that case, there's no need to expose his weaknesses, so the male lead had a sudden idea and started to talk nonsense. Since awakening appeared, some people can lift a ton truck, some can manipulate elements out of thin air. These are all very convenient abilities, but since these powers appeared out of nowhere, they could just as easily disappear. I'm a bit scared, so I don't plan to rely on awakening abilities. I was worried that the other person wouldn't believe me. But then, I saw Runsheng looking as if he was moved to tears. You're right. Why didn't I think of that? The easier something is to obtain, the easier it is to lose. As a dignified S-rank hunter, the man was strangely interested in the F-rank male lead. He even went so far as to create a car accident, just to get the male lead's contact information. Not long ago, the male lead had just walked out of the instance with Runsheng, and then treated himself to some junk food. And Runsheng requested that the male lead take him along for such things in the future, because his team had just disbanded. He had too little experience on his own, and he didn't want to form a new team. Regarding his thoughts, the male lead understood very well. After all, he had just experienced a teammate being stabbed. Anyone would have some psychological trauma from that. Moreover, he needed to enter the advanced empty gate, which required teaming up with advanced hunters, so the male lead agreed to this request. Of course, the male lead emphasized to Runsheng beforehand, you need to take care of yourself. I don't have the ability to save you. The male lead was always speaking the truth. But unfortunately, Runsheng didn't believe him. He thought the big shot was worried about him getting hurt. The next day, while the male lead was eating, he received a call from Runsheng. A new dungeon has opened, and asked the male lead if he wanted to check it out. Of course, the male lead excitedly agreed. Whenever a new empty gate appears, the Hunter Association sends people to investigate and temporarily restricts entry till the investigation is complete. In this empty gate, it is said that a special plant was discovered. Considering that unknown plant, it might be the key to restoring his magic. The male lead decided to go in, to take a look and leave immediately. If it wasn't, just then, a luxury sports car suddenly sped over. Then a man with blue hair got out, looking at this guy wearing black sunglasses and a big gold chain. He had a very arrogant look. The male lead asked Runsheng next to him who the person was. And Runsheng's answer was somewhat unexpected for the male lead. The person turned out to be one of the only 3S rank hunters in the country, Zhang Changhao. The male lead could see that his magic power was very stable. Indeed, a rare genius. While the male lead was observing him, Zhang Changhao suddenly sensed something. In the next moment, their gazes met. The other person's reaction surprised the male lead. His eyes seemed to be somewhat special. And Runsheng whispered to the male lead, "That's the dragon's eye. A rare item." While the two were whispering, Zhang Changhao walked over to them. Then he ignored Runsheng, the rank hunter, and stared directly at the male lead. He asked the male lead what his name was. After getting the answer, he asked the male lead what his hunter rank was. And Runsheng awkwardly took over the conversation, stating that the male lead was just his footman. However, Zhang Changhao just disdainfully looked at Runsheng. "I wasn't talking to you. I can't afford to provoke the big shot." And Runsheng was scared and hid behind the male lead. And the male lead calmly replied, "F rank." Upon hearing this, Zhang Changhao sneered. "Is that so? Really?" The other person's reaction made the male lead somewhat suspicious. Could he see through the hidden magic power of this body? Although the respiratory system was injured, resulting in the magic power not being able to output normally, the total amount of magic power in the body wouldn't decrease. And Zhang Changhao could use the dragon's eye to see a person's potential. But no matter what, the male lead would never admit it. After all, he has an officially certified hunter's license. However, Zhang Changhao didn't believe it. An S rank can look directly into his eyes. Just as he was about to invite the male lead to collaborate, he was suddenly interrupted by An Runsheng's voice. And Runsheng said, "We have other matters to attend to," and disregarded the male lead's struggles, pushing him away directly. Once the two were completely out of Zhang Changhao's sight, and Runsheng explained to the male lead why he did this. Because that man has a criminal record. No one wants to team up with an S-rank criminal to enter an empty door. And An Runsheng has a relative ranked third in a rank, who was recently attacked while entering a dungeon with Zhang Changhao. So An Runsheng was afraid the other party would attack the male lead, and took him to escape. The male lead was deeply moved after understanding all this. What a lovely mammal. Since the other party is so dangerous, then let's forget about it today. We'll look at that plant another time. But there's one more thing. Since the other party's dragon's eye is a prop, is there a dragon's lung? If I could switch it out, wouldn't that solve the problem of being unable to use magic? And Runsheng helped check it out. And there really is one, and the price is reasonable. 2.6 billion. What did you say? 2.6 billion. In a word, it directly extinguished the male lead's rising passion. It would have been better not to hear it. The poor male lead shed reluctant tears. Soon the two said goodbye. The male lead took a taxi back alone. In the car, he checked Zhang Changhao's information. The more he looked, the more he felt. The other party was terrifying. If I had known, I wouldn't have looked at him back then. What if he wants to harm me? But as the saying goes, what you fear will come. A supercar suddenly appeared behind the taxi, and then slammed into it with a stomp on the gas. With a loud screech of brakes, the taxi spun around a few times, and finally crashed into a pole on the side of the road and stopped. The male lead rolled directly under the seat. The recovering driver first nervously looked back at the male lead. The male lead was not injured. Then he got out of the car and was ready to curse. "Are you fucking kidding me? Can you drive?" Then he saw Zhang Changhao coming from the car. He walked down. "I really apologize for that. I haven't driven in a long time. I mixed up the brake and the gas." After saying that, he directly took out his phone to ask for the male lead's contact information. He said it was to discuss resolving the accident. As for the driver, he just tossed some money at him and told him to get lost. The male lead watched this divine operation in silence. The driver, having received the money, ran off in a flash. The remaining Zhang Changhao asked the male lead for his phone number again. He said he didn't have any cash. He would transfer the medical expenses to him later. Is this how car accidents are usually handled? The male lead felt like he was seeing a whole new world. But he still gave out his phone number. In this way, the S-Class Hunter went through a lot of trouble. Finally, he added the S-Class Hunter's contact information. Zhang Changhao was originally a rich second generation, but he had a history of special violent crimes. Although he hired an impressive lawyer, this matter is settled. When there are scandals about him all over the internet, and his biggest scandal is from a few years ago. His parents died due to a dungeon outbreak. After the incident, he immediately sold his parents' company. Because of this, many people suspect he did it for money and committed an outrageous act. Of course, that was just a rumor. There is no evidence for it. At this moment, Zhang Changhao looked at the male lead with great interest. "I have a money-making job. Do you want to hear about it?" The man is clearly just a low-level S-Class Hunter, yet the lofty S-Class Hunter is eager to team up with him. For that, he is even willing to offer 80% of the profits from the dungeon. This condition is like a pie falling from the sky. which greatly surprised the male lead. Could it be that the other party has taken a liking to the potential of his body? Does that mean when he can use magic, he can easily take control of this planet? Thinking of this, the male lead spoke proudly. I can't enter the S-class ability gate right now, and I don't know if I can work with you on this. However, Zhang Changhao's next words pulled him back to the cold reality. What are you thinking? A hunter of your level could never enter a high-level ability gate, right? It turns out Zhang Changhao wants to be the man behind the male lead, to personally train the male lead. Realizing he misunderstood, the male lead awkwardly wished to disappear on the spot. So that's how it is. But he still has one question. What exactly did you see in me to make such a suggestion? Hearing this, Zhang Changhao slowly curved his lips. Well, you'll know that later. Feeling like something is off, the male lead casually found an excuse to escape, and then told Runsheng about this matter. Now that I think about it, that guy clearly did it on purpose. And after hearing the male lead's experience, Runsheng became even more certain. The other party likes to cause trouble for high-level hunters. To this, the male lead also agreed. What should we do? Should we call the police? But what reason would we give? Could it be that S-class hunters need to protect themselves? Even sending equipment to himself. This might be seen as crazy, right? The male lead could only choose to give up helplessly. Just then, Runsheng suddenly brought up the recent news. It said that humans will soon conquer the disaster of the Void Gate. This topic is good. The male lead is very interested in the existence of the Void Gate. This world underwent mutation 7 years ago. The Void Gate and monsters began to appear in people's lives. At the same time, there were also human awakeners. Others may not know why. But the male lead understands. The principle of magic is to utilize the magical power released by the galaxy. But the Earth's crust is too thick, causing the magical power to not rise. However, the sudden appearance of the Void Gate phenomenon allowed the magical power to rise to the surface, which in turn led to the emergence of human awakeners. However, there is one thing the male lead cannot understand, and that is the purpose of the existence that created the Void Gate. What exactly is their goal? The monsters inside definitely want to kill humans, and the equipment that drops among them is just bait placed on the trap. But if the little mice avoid the trap, and it starts as just bait, then no matter who is behind it, they would become very angry, right? Runsheng listened to the male lead's words and felt it made a lot of sense. But the male lead suddenly got startled, because he felt a boiling force like lava coming from beneath his feet, and the location of this force's eruption was right under Runsheng's feet. To this, Runsheng felt nothing at all. He was curious why the male lead suddenly stopped. But the male lead didn't have time to say anything. He directly pushed Runsheng out. And then, in Runsheng's incredulous gaze, a tremendous energy suddenly surged into the sky, enveloping the male lead within it. Feeling the teleportation force coming from his body, the male lead realized something and regretted it. I should have pulled him earlier. Just like that, when the male lead came to his senses, he found himself in a pure white corridor. The male lead couldn't help but look around. Could this be inside an empty gate? If he encountered a monster in such a narrow place, that would be terrible. The male lead could only take action first. However, with this body that couldn't even release magic power, he really didn't know how to get through. So he walked along the way, and soon arrived at an open area. In front of him was a huge stone door blocking the way. There was a stone tablet in front of the door, which seemed to have something written on it. The male lead was about to observe it closely, but suddenly noticed someone approaching from both sides. In the middle, one of them was Zhang Changhao, who had ulterior motives towards him, and the other one he didn't recognize. Soon, they both arrived in front of the stone tablet. Forming a three-way standoff, Zhang Changhao stepped forward and mockingly said to the other person, "Oh, Zheng Jiaxing, I heard you are in Singapore." The other person replied, "I returned to the country today." It was clear that their relationship wasn't very good. So the male lead asked Zhang Changhao, "Do you two know each other?" This question shocked both of them. Zhang Changhao immediately mocked him to his face. "It turns out there are still people who don't know you. Looks like you need to work harder to get noticed." To this, the male lead just wanted to say, "I didn't know you before either." Then he heard Zhang Changhao explain, "His name is Zheng Jiaxing, the #1 hunter in country H." The male lead didn't expect the other party to be such an impressive guy. Next, Zhang Changhao introduced the male lead, an ordinary F-rank hunter. The two simply greeted each other and then focused, pressing a button on the wristband. This is an analyzer. The male lead didn't expect such a simple design. The results were quickly analyzed. This is an unconfirmed dimensional gate. There is no relevant intelligence level. To see EX is actually an X level. He felt troubled. The male lead didn't understand what EX represented. He took out his phone to check, but the phone displayed a pitch black screen. The male lead was confused, as it was his first time encountering such a situation. It turned out this was interference from the dimensional gate. If they didn't leave quickly, the phone would be useless. So they began to study the stone tablet. It was written that it symbolizes true faith. Come the key. Although he didn't know what this sentence meant, it seemed that in front of him, the only choice was to push open this huge stone door. They continued forward. This is a team with two of the strongest S-level hunters, but they exerted all their strength, yet couldn't budge this small stone door. The male lead felt greatly shocked by this. Among Awakeners, S-level is a special existence. They are all monsters with terrifying abilities. But now, they were helpless against a stone door. Since strength was not enough, the only thing left to try seemed to be this strange lion statue. Zhang Changhao stepped forward and took a look, and concluded that from the size of this opening, it seemed just right to fit an arm inside. This statement left the other two silent. The male lead had already guessed something, but before he could decide whether to go first, Zheng Jiaxing walked over first. Then, without hesitation, he reached his arm into the lion's mouth. At the same time, a rumbling sound echoed. The male lead and Zhang Changhao looked in the direction of the sound. As a result, they saw the door that had just been motionless opened by itself. The male lead noticed that Zheng Jiaxing's expression didn't seem good. He asked him what was wrong. Then he saw the other party raise the hand that had just gone in. It turned out he had just been drained of blood. Startled at the time, he wanted to pull his arm out. But no matter what, it couldn't be done. For this, he even considered the idea of cutting it off. Zhang Changhao didn't care about these things. After all, it wasn't his own blood that was flowing. Since the door is already open, let's go. At this moment, the male lead felt something was off. Is it really that simple? Just like that, the three of them continued down the passage. Then an identical large door appeared, along with an identical lion. Seeing this, Zhang Changhao's expression instantly darkened. Damn it, this time it's the same. However, Zheng Jiaxing directly pushed past him. There's no time to hesitate now. We must leave here as soon as possible. In the next moment, he reached his hand in again. The result was the same as before. The door opened automatically. Then the three of them saw the next stone door again. And this time, Zheng Jiaxing hoped Zhang Changhao would do it, because the amount of blood the lion drained had changed. The first time it didn't feel much. The second time, he felt a bit dizzy. If nothing unexpected happens, the amount drained would increase the further they went. So Zheng Jiaxing hoped they could take turns. But clearly, Zhang Changhao didn't have that kind of spirit of sacrifice. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to cooperate, Zhaoxing's expression instantly changed. And Zhang Changhao had a look that said, "What can you do to me?" A defiant expression. Seeing the atmosphere between the two becoming increasingly tense, the male lead was about to speak up to interrupt, rather than waiting to have a lethal amount of blood drained later. It would be better to take the initiative now. But before he could speak, Zhang Changhao was the first to say, "Isn't there one more person? You can look for him." Upon hearing this, the male lead instantly realized something was wrong. Although there are no monsters here, it's also not a safe place. Connecting it to the maze where one could continue forward by offering blood. It seemed that someone needed to be offered as a sacrifice to leave here. Thinking of this, the male lead's heart was filled with tears. I'm doomed. However, Zheng Zhaoxing's moral standards are clearly much higher than Zhang Changhao's. With two S-rank members in the team, you actually want to push the responsibility onto the S-rank? Before the words were finished, a few people sensed something and looked back, and then saw a monster appear out of thin air. Seeing this, the male lead was startled. It seems that there is indeed something here. In the next second, the monster began its attack, and its first target was actually the male lead. Given the male lead's current condition, clearly cannot be stopped. At this moment, he was so scared that he closed his eyes. At a critical moment, he focused and bent down to draw his sword. Then a thrust. The monster was dealt with on the spot. This handsome display left the male lead in awe. As for the other guy, better not to mention. Just then, another monster appeared and attacked from behind Zhang Changhao. Seeing that the other party had no reaction, the male lead quickly shouted a warning. However, Zhang Changhao's emerald-like eyes only slightly glanced back. In the next moment, he slammed the monster to the ground with a heavy punch. Look at this terrifying strength. The male lead speculated. His awakening skill is related to physical enhancement. With one punch, Zhang Changhao roughly estimated the monster's level. It's probably at the level of a C-class monster. At this moment, he was reminding everyone not to let their guard down. Hearing this, the two looked in the direction of his gaze. As a result, they saw the shadow of several monsters on the walls on both sides, and soon, one by one, the monsters sprang out from within. In the blink of an eye, the three were heavily surrounded by the monsters. Although they were not high-level monsters, but having so many of them is really annoying. Two hunters who don't see eye to eye leave their backs to each other. Then Zhang Changhao clenched his glowing green fist. With one punch, he unleashed a wave of green energy, destroying everything in its path. Meanwhile, Zheng Zhaoxing tightened his grip on his weapon, then swung his sword. A fiery storm swept through the area. The male lead watched in surprise. At the performance of the two S-class hunters, all the monsters were drawn away by them, so that not a single one was left on the male lead side. Soon, Zheng Zhaoxing began to feel a bit tired, due to having his blood drained, causing his stamina to weaken. And with so many monsters, this situation definitely couldn't continue. Just then, he suddenly saw the stone lion's red eyes. Then a flash of inspiration struck his mind. So that's how it is. The man, clearly the top-ranked S-class hunter, was knocked out by someone in a dungeon, just because his teammates speculated that a sacrifice was needed to clear this dungeon. Just now, Zhang Changhao and Zheng Zhaoxing finished off a wave of monsters. Although the monsters weren't too strong, there were just too many of them, and their performance greatly impressed the male lead. It seems the plan to conquer Earth is a long way off. Just then, Zheng Zhaoxing urged the other two to look at the statue. At that moment, the lion had eyes glowing with a crimson light. Then he gathered his thoughts and voiced his speculation. If this empty gate doesn't offer blood within the specified time, a horde of monsters will appear. But before he could finish speaking, a monster suddenly appeared behind him. Zhang Jiaxing stabbed this ambushing guy with his sword. And Zhang Changhao, with great interest, asked, "Is there a time limit?" As soon as he finished speaking, a large wave of monsters rushed out in a frenzy. Seeing this, even Zhang Jiaxing felt immense pressure. He no longer relied on Zhang Changhao. That guy shouted the male lead's name, hoping the male lead could donate blood first. Who would have thought that before the male lead could respond, Zhang Changhao suddenly turned around. Then, without any hesitation, charged towards the statue. Even when faced with countless monsters blocking the way, he did not stop at all. In the end, he successfully reached in with his arm. In the next moment, countless monsters dissipated like ink. The male lead and the others were all astonished at this scene. At the same time, the door to the next level slowly opened again. At this moment, Zhang Changhao turned around and asked who would go next. Zhang Jiaxing suggested that they take turns, because the F level might not hold up. Truly a national hero. The high-quality male lead admired him. Thanks to him, he hadn't even gotten his clothes dirty until now. This made the male lead feel a bit embarrassed. Just like that, the three of them passed through several stone doors again. At this point, due to excessive blood loss, even Zhang Jiaxing, the strongest hunter, couldn't hold on any longer. Seeing this, the male lead hurriedly stepped forward to support him, asking if he was okay. Zhang Jiaxing, with a pale face, said he was fine. This type of sudden dimensional gate is generally small in scale. They should be close to the exit. The male lead looked at the still energetic Zhang Changhao and sighed. Fortunately, it was his turn to open the door this time. However, at this moment, Zhang Changhao suggested they stop for a while. After all, no one could guarantee how many more doors were ahead. And both of their bodies were nearing their limits. Zhang Changhao believed they might have missed some clues, and needed to go back and look for them. While Zhang Jiaxing only felt that he was stalling for time, and might even want to take advantage of the monster wave to attack them. Just like before when he attacked Kui Zhen. Faced with the other suspicion, Zhang Changhao fell into silence. Then he said no more, and turned to walk towards the statue. However, regarding the matter with Kui Zhen, he stated it was just a misunderstanding. Of course, he also understood why he wasn't trusted. After all, he has a criminal record. At this moment, Zhang Changhao turned to look at Zhang Jiaxing behind him. "You are too wary of me. Even if it's your turn to donate blood this time, I would still suggest going back to check the room." As he spoke, Zhang Changhao had already reached in. This time it was clear he was also about to reach his limit. Seeing this, Zhang Jiaxing stepped forward and asked him worriedly if he was okay. Hearing this, Zhang Changhao said it was fine. He brought recovery medicine and could hold on for 2 more times. As he said this, he began to take things out of his bag. And Zhang Jiaxing said, "If we reach the next room and still can't see the exit, just think of other ways." The male lead watched Zhang Changhao take out a bottle of recovery medicine, thinking that this person was quite normal. Should I support him next? But then he saw the other person, swinging the bottle down towards the unsuspecting Zhang Jiaxing. With a bang, the bottle hit Zhang Jiaxing's back of the head. A close encounter has arrived. Just like that, the mighty S-rank hunter was knocked down by a bottle. Zhang Jiaxing lost consciousness on the spot. The male lead was dumbfounded beside him. Zhang Changhao was very satisfied with this outcome. "I didn't expect this move to be so effective." "The male lead?" asked Zhang Changhao with a face full of cold sweat. "Why did you do that?" And Zhang Changhao explained, "This alternate dimension gate is very similar to the Iron Lady alternate dimension gate that appeared in Northern Europe. If nothing unexpected happens, The hunter who enters the alternate dimension gate can only be the one from Jixian who leaves. Moreover, based on the recent survival rate statistics from the EX dungeon, it has nothing to do with the hunter's level. The survival rate is only about 60%. So, just in case, we can only make Zhang Jiaxing suffer a bit. The male lead thought carefully. What he said makes sense. If someone has to sacrifice, it would be best if it wasn't himself. Besides, aren't there two S ranks? Responsibility surely shouldn't fall on just one S rank, right? That said, the male lead still felt guilty in his conscience. So, just as Zhang Changhao was about to send Zhang Jiaxing's arm into the gate, the male lead suddenly interrupted him. He patted his own chest, indicating that he would handle this room. Hearing this, Zhang Changhao glanced at him. Are you feeling guilty now? When I'm taking the lead, just stay quiet. I will ensure you leave here alive. From the amount of blood the lion has taken, this trial should be coming to an end. And as the stone door slowly opened again, the male lead was surprised to speak out. Because the scene before them finally changed. They saw a person standing quietly not far away. And in the statue's hand lay the reward for clearing this level. Both of them widened their eyes in disbelief. It ended so easily. Zhang Changhao felt this was unscientific. Because the cost was just too small. He thought a live sacrifice would be needed. So he knocked out Zhang Jiaxing. But this makes things a bit tricky. If Zhang Jiaxing wakes up and questions it, it could lead to big trouble. However, the male lead didn't care about the other's dilemma. Calmly walked to the statue and took the final reward. Just one look and you could tell. This thing in his hand is a precious magical artifact. But the male lead had no greed at all. He suggested giving this item as an apology to Zhang Jiaxing. But Zhang Changhao thought it was useless. You have to know he attacked the number 1 rank hunter. Not just him. Even the association won't let him go. The best way to handle this now is to take the opportunity to eliminate the opponent. After all, the body will disappear with an empty door. But the problem is, there is a witness. Zhang Changhao doesn't believe the male lead will keep it a secret for him. And the male lead asks what the other plans to do. Kill himself? This made Zhang Changhao a bit sad. He can't bear that. It's just a small request. Saying this, Zhang Changhao patted the male lead's shoulder, then stared at the male lead with a sinister look. Can you say that you knocked out Zhang Jiaxing? The man just cleared a dungeon once. And as a result, he received everyone's attention. Just because he admitted that he knocked out the S-rank number 1 hunter. Just now, Zhang Changhao suggested that the male lead take the blame for him. And the reason he did this was just to see the male lead's true abilities. Zhang Changhao's vision is different from ordinary people because he possesses a pair of dragon eyes that he obtained from the A-rank monster green dragon, a rare item. With it, he can not only enhance his magical power, but also see far away. And he can directly use these eyes to determine a person's awakening value. Since he got these eyes, he has never squinted to see anything. Till not long ago, he encountered the male lead. From the other person, he saw an unusual magical power he had never seen before. So, he directly approached to ask the other person's name and level. When he learned that the other person's level was only F rank, Zhang Changhao's first feeling was that it was a lie. Because an F-rank hunter could never look directly into his eyes. In the eyes of ordinary people and low-level awakeners, a high-level awakener like him is like a fierce beast, exuding a deadly threat. To verify this, in the end, Zhang Changhao specifically went to the convenience store he hadn't visited in a long time. He tried it out. And sure enough, the clerk was scared and trembling. So F rank, what? Is just nonsense. So to tease the male lead, Zhang Changhao first created a little accident and then offered him the best benefits ever proposed. But all along, the male lead maintained a poker face. This attitude even made Zhang Changhao feel like he was looking down on me, an S-rank hunter. However, for Zhang Changhao, who had endured various gazes, the male lead's indifference actually satisfied him. So he made the male lead take the blame. Not because he disliked the male lead. In fact, he had the ability to resolve Zhang Jiaxin's issue. But he wanted to know what abilities the male lead was hiding. He wanted to see how he would react to his intimidation. But what he didn't expect was that the male lead actually agreed just like that. This greatly exceeded Zhang Changhao's expectations, leaving him momentarily speechless. From the other person's face, Zhang Changhao saw no fear at all. So why did he do this? Could it be that he didn't want to conflict with me? Speaking of which, the other party said he couldn't enter the S rank, empty gate now. But he never said he couldn't before. Zhang Changhao had reason to suspect that the male lead was deliberately suppressing his power as a high-level awakener. Was it necessary to suppress his power to such an extent? That must be uncomfortable, right? Although he wanted to continue provoking the other. Let's just stop here for today. For now, let's leave this damn place first. What he didn't know was, beneath the male lead's calm exterior, he was actually panicking inside. He finally survived. Just like that, the male lead was in front, and Zhang Changhao was supporting him. Zhang Jiaxing was behind. The three of them walked towards the exit of the instance. When the male lead returned outside again, he was soon shocked by the scene before him, because there were a dense crowd of reporters not far away, and seeing someone alive coming out. Those reporters waiting here became excited one by one. The sound of shutters kept ringing out. At the same time, the reporters eagerly began to ask questions. What monsters are in the empty gate? What is their level? Are there any other survivors? It was at this moment that the male lead realized. No wonder there are so many people here. So all the exits are here. Before the male lead could ask anything, the reporters all widened their eyes in disbelief. Zhang Changhao was seen carrying Zhang Jiaxing, walking out from an empty gate. I didn't expect there to be two S ranks. But why did Zhang Jiaxing faint? At the same time, the association staff rushed forward to inquire about the situation. Although there were many questions to ask, the first question was, why did Zhang Jiaxing faint? The staff thought that Zhang Jiaxing was attacked by a secret device in the empty gate. But who would have thought? Zhang Changhao actually looked at the male lead and said, we just had a little friction when choosing the sacrifice, so he knocked him out. The male lead looked at him speechlessly, lying right after coming out of the instance. As for this statement, the staff didn't believe it at all. After all, compared to a hunter they've never heard of, it's obviously more likely that Zhang Changhao was the one who acted. Although this is indeed the case, the feeling of being suspected still made Zhang Changhao feel very unhappy. In the next moment, he stared at the male lead with his emerald green eyes. Don't just stand there, say something. The male lead, being stared at, broke out in a cold sweat. He helplessly remained silent for a moment, then expressionlessly said, I knocked him out. Upon hearing this, both the association staff and the reporters on site gaped in shock. Even though the male lead explained that he didn't intend to harm him, he just made him sleep to pass the level smoothly, and that he would apologize when he woke up. No matter how he put it, it was still hard to believe, because hunters below S rank simply couldn't do this. However, just then, Zhang Changhao suddenly showed an extremely weak appearance. He gasped and looked at the association staff. In my current state, how could I have attacked Zhang Jiaxing? Upon hearing this, the association staff fell into silence. Although Zhang Changhao lost a lot of blood in the empty gate, The male lead remembered that it wasn't that serious. He estimated that this guy was faking it. Just then, the reporters present suddenly reacted, and they rushed towards the male lead in a swarm. They repeatedly questioned if he really knocked out an S rank. The male lead coldly replied, "I did it." Looking at the reports about him in hand, Zheng Jiaxing, who woke up in the hospital, couldn't help but clench his fists. He actually dared to treat me this way. That man is clearly just a low-level S-rank hunter, but attracted the attention of the strongest S-rank hunters one by one. Just now, and Runsheng invited the male lead to dinner. Although the previous news was deleted, and Ruisheng had already seen it, he wanted to know if it was true that the male lead knocked out Zheng Jiaxing. And the male lead's reply surprised him greatly. "I guess that counts." As soon as he finished speaking, the male lead's phone rang. Upon answering, the delicious food from earlier suddenly didn't seem appetizing anymore, because the caller was none other than the victim, Zheng Jiaxing. The male lead responded while telling Ruisheng to eat first, and he went to the side to make a phone call, leaving Runsheng all alone. The purpose of Zheng Jiaxing's call was very simple. He wanted to know about the empty gate. Did the male lead really knock himself out? Although the incident was sudden, he couldn't remember the process. But based on his feelings, this should have been done by Zhang Changhao. But he couldn't be sure. Zheng Jiaxing said he only remembered being hit on the back of the head. But the problem is, the last thing he saw was the male lead's indifferent gaze. So now, he wants the male lead to explain this matter. The male lead listened with cold sweat all over his head. This is not good. Should he just come clean? That Zhang Changhao threatened him to take the blame. But how could he trust Zheng Jiaxing? You have to know, Zheng Jiaxing is called a national hero. Not because he is a messenger of justice, but simply because of the number of empty gates he has cleared, which is far ahead. In the end, he is just a workaholic, interested only in dungeons. Would such a person protect a mere F rank? So the male lead admitted to this matter. Zheng Jiaxing, I'm sorry. I was the one who knocked you out. Then the male lead explained that he just didn't want to see him working too hard. He originally planned to be the sacrifice as an apology, and give the rewards from clearing the dungeon to him. In simple terms, it made Zheng Jiaxing's veins bulge. Are you fucking kidding me? This issue could have been resolved through conversation. But now, you want to settle it with an item? He couldn't accept that, no matter who it was. In a situation where a sacrifice was needed, being knocked out by someone, it was impossible to believe it was for his own good. Moreover, Zhang Changhao and the male lead knew Zheng Jiaxing from the start, suspecting the two were in cahoots. Of course, the most important thing is, are you really an S-rank hunter? Hearing this, the male lead fell into silence. He wanted to say he had his reasons, but Zheng Jiaxing no longer wanted to listen to his nonsense. Continuing is just a waste of time. In the end, Zheng Jiaxing looked out the window. He said, I will keep an eye on you from now on. After saying that, he didn't wait for the male lead to continue explaining. He directly hung up the phone. Then he calmed down. He apologized to the assistant, who had been waiting for a long time. The assistant chuckled awkwardly and said it was fine. Then, he handed over all the information the other party wanted. Although the guild was about to take action, those news articles had already been taken down. But what needed to be seen had already been seen. A large number of people disparaging Zheng Jiaxing appeared online. The assistant told him not to look at those replies. But Zheng Jiaxing was not that fragile yet. The current issue is, the whole world already knows that S-rank hunters are not invincible. Many people will feel uneasy because of this. And the person responsible for all this, the assistant guest, is Zhang Changhao. Additionally, he also investigated the male lead's identity. He really is just an S rank. At first, Zheng Jiaxing thought so too. But if that's really the case, Zhang Changhao had no reason to let him live. There was no need to intimidate him, to take the blame for himself. Wouldn't it be simpler to just kill him? Aside from that, more importantly, the eyes he saw when he fell down had no human emotions at all. Since awakening, Zheng Jiaxing had never seen someone with such a strong sense of incongruity. He had reason to suspect that the other party's rank was fabricated. He asked the assistant to contact the association to apply for a re-evaluation of that man's awakening value. The superpowers used by awakeners are commonly referred to as skills. At the moment every awakener awakens, they will at least learn one skill. But the magic on this planet has various limitations. For example, Zheng Jiaxing with fire attributes, even if he tried his hardest, could not learn other types of magic. They want to find a way to use magic of other attributes. There is only one. That is, to spend a fortune to buy skill stones. But the male lead is different. He is someone who has reincarnated after learning various types of magic. Theoretically, as long as the conditions are met, he can use all the magic on Earth. However, this body has lung problems, which prevents the magic power from merging. His talents cannot be displayed. To solve this problem, he found a way to create a magic amplifier. But the materials needed to produce the amplifier are not so easy to obtain, because he is in the hands of the guild with the most hunters currently, the Magic Tower. At this moment, the male lead is standing outside the Magic Tower, and as soon as he appears, he is driven away by the staff. This is because the male lead came yesterday, and those without an appointment cannot enter. However, just at this moment, his little brother, En Runsheng, suddenly appears. It turns out he asked En Runsheng to help make an appointment. And as a well-known first-level hunter, En Runsheng's application is much easier. Seeing En Runsheng appear, the staff, who had just looked impatient, instantly changed their expression. Because he happens to be a fan of En Runsheng, the two began to enthusiastically communicate. En Runsheng stated that he has already made an appointment with the Magic Tower representative through the guild. Thus, the male lead smoothly entered the interior of the Magic Tower. The staff also apologized for what just happened. Then the two went to the front desk to inform them that they already had an appointment, and the front desk had already been notified, and informed them that the representative was on the top floor. Then they were told to take the elevator up themselves. And when the elevator reached the 60th floor, the scene before them startled both of them. The male lead looked at the scene in front of him with cold sweat. It seems like something went wrong here. At the same time, on the top floor of the Magic Tower, there is a girl with red hair, waiting for something. She is clearly one of the 3 strongest S-rank hunters, but she just happened to take a liking to a low-level S-rank hunter. She almost drooled at the sight of him. Just now, the male lead felt something was off upon entering the Magic Tower. They clearly pressed the button for the 60th floor, but they ended up on the 2nd floor. The male lead thought the elevator was broken. When he heard En Runsheng explain, it turns out this is the guild leader's test for them. The representative of the Magic Tower is the guild leader. He is one of the 3 strongest S-rank hunters, and has a peculiar personality. Any visitor who wants to see him must pass through a maze test. And the Magic Tower itself is a huge maze. So this time, they can only rely on themselves to find the top floor. In that case, the male lead decided to take the stairs. However, things were clearly not that simple. After the 2nd floor, they unexpectedly found an underground parking lot. It turns out that just by opening the door, they would connect to a strange space. They could only continue to go in circles. Seeing this, they had no choice but to return to the 2nd floor. At this point, the male lead asked how many had passed the test. And Runsheng, with a face full of cold sweat, replied, "Not a single one." Not only that, He heard that aside from a few high-ranking officials, even the staff didn't know that the passage actually allowed visitors to pass through empty-handed. Such a complex maze is indeed a twisted sense of humor. But I have to say, this maze is really well done. The male lead is somewhat looking forward to meeting the sorcerer who created this maze, because this magical maze gives him a sense of the ambience that only his hometown has. The two stood in front of the elevator door again, and Runsheng asked the male lead what to do, and the male lead told him not to worry. Saying this, he placed his hand on the elevator door, carefully feeling. Even though this body is a waste right now, there are still things it can do. And this magical structure is surprisingly simple. I found the way to the top floor. Hearing this, and Runsheng widened his eyes in disbelief. Really? How do we get there? The male lead answered him with action. First, he pressed the elevator button. Then he pressed the button for the top floor outside. Finally, he stepped back and waited for the elevator door to close. And he signaled in Runsheng to step back. In the next moment, the male lead took a few steps back. Then, in Runsheng's shocked gaze, he kicked the elevator door. With tremendous force, the elevator door was kicked down. An open space appeared, and Runsheng looked at this scene with cold sweat on his face, not understanding why the male lead suddenly did this. The male lead calmly said, "Let's go." Below connects to an empty door above. As soon as he finished speaking, the male lead jumped down without hesitation. When he landed again, he had already arrived in another space. Of course, and Runsheng followed him. But this felt even more thrilling than jumping off a cliff into an empty door. Just then, a voice suddenly came from not far away. "I didn't expect you to find this place." Then, a super beautiful red-haired girl turned around. "You are the two who have ever been the fastest to clear my maze." At this moment, and Runsheng was already captivated by her beauty, while the male lead still had a deadpan expression. The girl then stood up and said, "I didn't expect you to find the hidden passage, but your good luck ends here. Because from now on, you will have to face me." Magic Tower Guild representative, Aster, is here. Next, Aster asked the two to sit down first. Then she asked Runsheng to introduce the male lead. She was very interested in the male lead, because ordinary analytical skills couldn't possibly find his maze passage, and the male lead solved it too easily. At the same time, the male lead also realized, this is the person who designed the maze. Sure enough, just like the rumors, her personality is special. Next, he introduced himself. Aster smiled at the male lead. "I like strong people. As someone who also possesses a rare attribute, let's get along." Well, however, as an alien who just crossed over not long ago, the male lead couldn't understand what the other person was saying at all. What does the same rare attribute mean? It turns out Aster mistakenly thought the male lead was someone who awakened analytical skills. Such people are quite rare. At the same time, and Runsheng explained to the male lead, Aster is one of the very few curse attribute hunters in the world. At this moment, the male lead suddenly remembered. He seemed to have seen the other party, who is an awakener that uses various abnormal states to kill monsters. This world has just begun to have magic power, and very few people can use complex spells. Most of them, Zheng Jiaxing and Zhang Changhao, simply use brute force. Even defensive and recovery types like in Runsheng are considered few. As for those with special abilities like identification, curses, and brainwashing, they can only be described as extremely rare. Thinking of this, the male lead started to babble. "Sorry, couldn't recognize you. I'm not well informed." Upon hearing this, Aster couldn't help but cover her mouth and smile. "A talented identifier like you must be fully booked, right? I've been participating in TV shows lately." After the small talk, they began to get to the main topic. Aster asked in Runsheng, "Do you want to enter their empty door?" Suddenly called upon, and Runsheng quickly replied, "Yes. But the one really entering is not him, but the male lead." Then the male lead explained that in Runsheng was just making a reservation for him, because his level is too low, and the people from the magic tower wouldn't pay him any mind. Saying this, he took out his identification. Aster was slightly surprised upon seeing this. F rank, but he wasn't too surprised. Identifiers are usually like this, although this is considered the lowest among identifiers. Additionally, Aster was curious why the male lead wanted to enter that empty door. If he wants to collect things inside, it would put him in a bit of a dilemma, because the materials on that tree are not enough for him either. Upon hearing this, the male lead solemnly stated that he would absolutely not touch the trees. But even so, Aster couldn't just agree to let the male lead go in, because he thought the male lead was like in Runsheng, a member of the New Sister Guild. After all, monopolizing an empty door requires a lot of funds. He is not doing charity. If he really wants to go in, he shouldn't come over himself, but should have the guild talk to the guild. So, he reminded the male lead not to think about taking advantage. Hates haggling. Remember to remind your guild. The male lead felt the other party was showing off. It's just a D-rank dungeon. They probably don't even recognize a quarter of the good resources inside. But what he said next left Aster stunned. Oh, right, I don't have a guild. At the same time, and Runsheng stood up to vouch for the male lead. Don't even mention a guild. Big Brother doesn't even have his own team. He operates solo. And the male lead also spoke up. Although you keep calling me an appraiser, but I've never worked in this field. In this circle, only know in Runsheng. A simple sentence almost moved in Runsheng to tears. The male lead stated that this was just his personal commission. No guild would benefit from this. Saying this, he wanted to put forward his own conditions. After all, he never thought of entering someone else's empty door for free. However, before he could finish speaking, he was suddenly interrupted by Aster. Are you saying that you only see? Just now, you had a look that kept others at a distance. Aster's expression was so excited that even his hair was flying. He smacked his lips and looked at the male lead, like a hunter seeing the most delicious prey, leaving the male lead covered in cold sweat. What's going on? I haven't even mentioned the conditions that would make you drool. A woman is willing to offer a signing bonus of 500 million. Just to hire the man in front of her to work 4 days a week and take 3 days off. Who would have thought this guy, who can barely afford a meal, would actually choose to refuse? Hearing that the male lead hasn't joined any guild yet, Aster, who just had a business-like demeanor, suddenly slammed the table. Why didn't you say something so important earlier? Come touch the tower. I'll hire you right away. That empty door doesn't mean anything. As long as you come, I can just give it to you. Upon hearing this, the male lead appeared unfazed. In fact, he was already extremely excited inside. Wow, a pie really fell from the sky. And Aster quietly explained to the male lead. It turns out that large guilds have a high circulation of magic crystals and equipment. They are in urgent need of talent and identification. With that said, the male lead understood. Humans on Earth cannot judge the purity of magic crystals with the naked eye. Not wanting to be scammed, it's best to bring an appraiser during transactions. While the male lead was deep in thought, Aster suddenly reached out a hand, then opened his mouth wide. The signing bonus is 500 million. Upon hearing this, the male lead was shocked by the other party's generosity. He couldn't help but exclaim, "What did you say?" And Aster thought. The New Sister Guild offered a higher price. For a moment, he felt like roaring to the sky. They had already taken Aster away. Why do they also want to take the hunter I have my eyes on? Seeing this, Aster, covered in cold sweat, advised him to calm down. Meanwhile, the male lead was thinking about how much food he could buy with 500 million. How many rice bowls could he eat? After calming down, Aster tittied his hair, then stated, "They have hired many excellent appraisers, so the workload is not very high." Although he had already heard it clearly, the male lead still wanted to confirm. "Do you really want to hire me as an appraiser? Spending 500 million feels promising." Aster looked delighted. Of course. At this moment, the male lead was truly moved. No need to suffer through exploring an empty door. Just doing appraisals could lead to great wealth. He almost wanted to agree immediately. Then Aster happily stated, "The analysis department has a flexible work system. You only need to work 4 days a week." This sentence directly shattered the male lead's fantasy. Just because the words "work" hit his sensitive nerves deeply. "I reincarnated for the sake of retirement. Now, you want me to stamp the contract with my own hands? Run back to the company to work." With work comes overtime. You have to greet your boss and deal with annoying complaints. Just thinking about it, the male lead felt a deep headache. "I absolutely do not want to work anymore." At this moment, Aster had already taken out the highest paying contract. Even the rank hunter in Runsheng was surprised. Seeing this, Aster seized the opportunity within Runsheng. "If you change your mind, we welcome you anytime." But didn't notice. At this time, the male lead had already lowered his head in frustration. Then they heard the male lead's low voice come over. "I'm sorry, let's pretend I never heard that proposal." Upon hearing this, Aster was shocked. "How much do you actually want?" But the male lead explained it wasn't about the money at all. He just didn't want to join any guild. Aster looked directly into his eyes, confirming that this was his true thought. Then he changed his expression in a second. "Is that so? Since you've decided this. But that's okay. Rejecting my proposal. Wanting to enter an empty door requires a large sum of money." This amount of money, the male lead definitely couldn't come up with. But fortunately, he was well prepared. "I want to make a deal with you." The male lead stood up and said, "I know of a magical substance. As long as this thing is mixed into cement and metal, when building a building, it can be immune to any skills to a certain extent, and can absorb magical power. Even if attacked by monsters, it won't fall." Saying this, he walked to the window and continued, "The entire magic tower is wrapped in a barrier. The maintenance costs must be high." The male lead thought this would be enough as an entry fee. Aster listened with boredom, then coldly said, "This is certainly enough. But only on the premise that the thing is indeed useful." And the male lead directly pulled out a bag of sand from his body. "You can have as much of this as you want. Only I know the location." And Runsheng recognized at a glance that it was the male lead. The thing used to deal with the fire bats before. Does this sand also have the effect of absorbing magical power? Although using this as a condition seems a bit unprofitable. But that place is frequently visited by people. It will be discovered sooner or later. It's better to do a favor. Aster picked up the sand and looked at it, curious if this thing really has that effect. Then he looked at the male lead and asked, "Exchanging such valuable information for access to a trashy, empty door. You wouldn't have made this deal with others, would you?" Hearing this, the male lead was speechless. Just now, he was saying how valuable his empty door was. And now, he's calling it a trashy empty door. "Heh, woman," the male lead asked, "do you need to ensure that you won't tell anyone else?" And Aster was curious, "Isn't this a disadvantage for you?" Just as the two were discussing, Aster's assistant brought coffee to several people. And regarding the previous question, the male lead stated, "Let's consider it as a mutually beneficial exchange between our rare attributes." In the blink of an eye, the male lead and the other person had already left. Aster was drinking coffee as usual. But the assistant felt that the representative seemed a bit unhappy. So he asked about it. And Aster said, "It's not really something to be unhappy about. It's just that he just made a joke with a customer." This startled the assistant. Did he place a curse on the previous customer? Thinking of this, the assistant instantly turned into a worried state. "Representative, you said you wouldn't do such things." And Aster had a nonchalant expression. "It's not a terrible curse or anything." The assistant asked what it was this time. Aster happily said, "A sneeze for 30 seconds. Hearing this, the assistant felt it was really boring. But he didn't hear anyone sneeze. That's right, when he used the skill just now. The man should have sneezed. But the other party suddenly looked up at him. At that moment, his eyes were filled with killing intent. Even Aster was startled by the other party. He must have noticed. Clearly, even an S rank can't escape his curse. I don't know where that monster jumped out from. It came just as Aster was complaining. The sand left by the male lead has been tested. It really has a magic absorption effect. I can't believe something like this was given so readily. The assistant speculated. The male lead wants to leave a good impression on the representative. But Aster felt that this was even more terrifying. Then he asked the assistant to bring the male lead's resume. He wanted to see what that man was really planning. The scene shifted to the other side. Just moments ago, the male lead was as steady as a rock. But now, he was crouched in a corner of the street, vomiting continuously. But it wasn't because of the curse. It was because of the cup of coffee he drank earlier. He had heard it was a drink prepared for distinguished guests, so he drank it without any preparation. And then, he almost spat it out on the spot. Because it completely smelled like industrial adhesive. The scent of industrial-grade glue, saying it was for distinguished guests. And they actually gave him this kind of thing. Then the two of them locked eyes. Just at that moment, Aster used a curse. The result was that the male lead was afraid of being discovered as an alien. He wanted to vomit, but didn't dare to. And Aster mistakenly thought the other party's eyes were filled with killing intent. Little did he know that the male lead's body was being controlled by Little Green through magic. Unless that person's magic is stronger than this alien's. Otherwise, by any means, he wouldn't be able to take control of this body. Even if it was the curse of an S-rank hunter. The male lead, recovering, unsteadily bought a bottle of mineral water to rinse his mouth. And in Runsheng, asked about the thing the male lead had just given to Aster. He had never heard of it. This substance can not only extinguish flames instantly, but also the flames of bats. It can also make buildings more solid. The value of this substance is obvious. But the male lead did not turn it into the association. Instead, he gave it to the magic tower. And Runsheng suspected that the male lead disliked the association. But the male lead said he did not. He had no feelings for the association. He then explained. He just wanted to leave a good impression on Aster. It was originally a very simple statement. And Runsheng was shocked after hearing it. He suspected. Could it be that Aster is the type the male lead likes? Unfortunately, the male lead stated that he had no feelings for Aster. Oh, I see. And Runsheng, who guessed wrong twice in a row, fell into embarrassment. So, what exactly are you looking for in that otherworldly gate? That you would go to such lengths? The man was grateful for the first time that his body was that of a smoker. Because those with respiratory issues cannot measure magical power. Just now, the sore-bodied male lead stretched and woke up. Then, the first thing he did was check if the things next to him had dried. These are the materials he collected yesterday within Runsheng, when they entered the otherworldly gate to trade with Aster. These are the materials needed to make a magical power amplifier. Wings of fairy-type magical beasts. He originally thought it would be hard to obtain. Thanks to Runsheng for the help. Since the hardest materials have already been obtained. So the rest will be much easier. He is once again aiming to restore his former strength. made a big step forward. But let's put that aside for now. There are more important things right now, and that is to fill the stomach. However, just as he was struggling with what to eat today, he suddenly heard a knock at the door. The male lead was quite puzzled by this. What's going on? Could it be a family member of this body? If it's an acquaintance of the original owner, it would be very troublesome. Then, with a nervous heart, the male lead opened the door and saw a beautiful woman, and the figures of two big men. Among them, the girl was an old acquaintance, Zuan Yuyan from the Hunter Association. The male lead was curious about what they wanted from him. Then he learned from Zuan Yuyan that someone reported him for falsifying his awakening level. And now, he needs to go to the Hunter Association for an investigation. Upon hearing this, the male lead was instantly shocked. What did you say? At this moment, the two big men had already started cracking their knuckles. If you don't want to be caught, it's best to behave yourself. The male lead looked at them with a face full of cold sweat. It seems this meal is not going to happen. Soon, the group got into the car back to the association. Zhu Yuyan sat in the front row scrolling through her phone, while the male lead was sandwiched between the two big men, not daring to move. Actually, Zhu Yuyan had long suspected the male lead's level. After all, how could a mere F rank possibly defeat a Fikino assassin? As for the luck, the other party mentioned, Zhu Yuyan didn't believe it at all. However, after checking the information, she was even more confused. It really is F rank, huh? And the record of entering an empty door is only one. As a hunter's resume, it's just too simple. A guy who only entered an F rank empty door once, and took down a C rank monster in one go. That doesn't make sense no matter how you think about it. If the other party really concealed their awakening level, it would be very dangerous. People like this usually do things secretly, but Zhu Yuyan had no authority to continue investigating the male lead, so he directly reported to the higher-ups. Originally, this matter would have just passed by. No one above took the report seriously. But a few days ago, the situation unexpectedly took a turn. Because Zheng Jiaxing, who left an empty door in a coma, also reported the male lead. Unlike Zhu Yuyan, who is just a small civil servant, Zheng Jiaxing is a national hero. After receiving the notice for a re-examination, Zhu Yuyan originally thought the male lead would resist. Unexpectedly, he actually came along obediently. And that house of his was old and dilapidated. It really is. Doesn't look like a place a high-ranking hunter should live. Could it be that he hid all his money? Just as Zhu Yuyan was deep in thought, the male lead, who had already changed his clothes, suddenly spoke up, interrupting his curiosity about how much it costs to retest the awakening level. He can barely afford to eat. Upon hearing this, Zhu Yuyan explained, the testing fee is 480,000. However, since it's a retest, if the data hasn't changed, it's free. If the data is falsified, not only will they have to pay the testing fee, but they will also have to pay a fine. The male lead was initially very worried about his situation, but after seeing the results of others' tests, instantly relieved. If tested with this kind of thing, people with respiratory issues cannot possibly measure magical power. The male lead instantly felt stable. Fortunately, the original body was a smoker. His lungs were already damaged. Such equipment can't detect anything. However, he hadn't been happy for a few seconds when he felt like a bucket of cold water was poured over him. Because Zhu Yuyan actually told him there was the latest equipment. It turns out the association had already discovered, when the testing device checks patients with lung diseases, the accuracy rate decreases. And they had already issued a notice. But the male lead definitely wouldn't know that. Soon, they arrived in front of a high-tech device. At this moment, Zhu Yuyan reminded the male lead, You still have one chance to actively correct your level. Upon hearing this, the male lead hurriedly explained that there must be some misunderstanding. However, at this point, no matter how he struggled, it was useless. In the end, the male lead was pressed onto the cold iron bed while screaming. Soon the test results came out. The male lead sat nervously on the bed waiting for the verdict. And before the announcement, Zhu Yuyan kindly reminded the male lead, "You know what the punishment for falsely reporting your level is, right?" The male lead listened with a face full of cold sweat. He didn't know. Could it be that the terrifying, magical power of this body is about to be discovered? How would he explain it, then? Could it be that he has to confess he's an alien? Of course, more importantly, the 480,000 testing fee. How could he possibly come up with that? Just as the male lead was in a dilemma, Zhu Yuyan had already seen the results. Awakening value 14F level. You don't have any doubts, right? It's only 2 points higher than last year. That's all normal. Zhu Yuyan told the male lead not to worry. The male lead finally got his wish and didn't have to pay a fine. But he wasn't happy at all. So this body really is only F level. He originally thought he couldn't cast magic. It was a lung issue. But it turns out this body has no magical power at all. No wonder, back at the empty gate, the golem only attacked in Runsheng and didn't even notice his existence. It turns out he wasn't considered an intruder at all. Thinking of this, the male lead chuckled self-deprecatingly twice. Zhu Yuyan looked at him, doubting if he had mental issues. Little did she know, the male lead's mind was filled with only one thing. That is, his reincarnation magic had failed. And from now on, he has to live on Earth as the weakest magician. The male lead left the association in a daze. Fortunately, his suspicion was completely clear. Zhu Yuyan was responsible for escorting the male lead out. Seeing the male lead in this state, she worriedly asked if he really didn't need to go to the hospital. You have to know, lower-level awakeners often experience side effects after examination. If you're not feeling well, it's best to get checked out. However, the male lead said it wasn't necessary, and thanked her for her kindness. But he was almost moved to tears. This earthling is actually worried about him. But the male lead was still a bit curious. That is how she knew he was home today. It turns out Zhu Yuyan's skill is tracking. It can locate items and people in real time. Zhu Yuyan was explaining, this ability is very suitable for tracking criminals, but was suddenly interrupted by the male lead. Then both of them widened their eyes in shock, staring at the ground. They saw a figure not far away lying in a pool of blood. This was the girl's first time being moved by someone's kindness. But she didn't know the other party was actually an alien. Just moments ago, walking side by side with the male lead, Zhu Yuyan was startled. Because in front of them, a civet cat that had been hit by a car suddenly appeared. After regaining composure, he wasn't prepared to do anything. He had seen this kind of thing many times. However, the male lead's reaction shocked him. He saw the other party actually pick up the civet cat's corpse directly. Seeing this, Zhu Yuyan reminded the male lead, this has been dead for a while. Touching it directly like this is very dirty. However, the male lead held it tightly in his arms and said it's fine, just wash it clean. Then the male lead stood up and bid farewell to Zhu Yuyan. Zhu Yuyan looked at the male lead in disbelief. Stammering, she said, okay. Be careful. He thought the male lead was going to give the civet cat a proper burial. He never expected he would have such a kind side. Watching the other person leave. At that moment, he left an indelible impression of this man. Little did he know, in a place he couldn't see. The male lead was almost knocked out by happiness. It was like a pie falling from the sky. He actually found such a good biological specimen. It turns out there are two types of magical statues on the male lead's planet. One is a weapon magical statue made of rocks and metals. The other type is an organic magical statue made from animal corpses. In short, the male lead got a test subject. So the male lead started experimenting as soon as he got home and didn't know what was going on. The mixing was very unsuccessful. After all, he didn't have any decent tools. Controlling the temperature, humidity, and concentration was very difficult. Just when the male lead was having a headache, his phone suddenly rang. The male lead impatiently picked it up to take a look. Who calls him at PM instead of sleeping? It's all his fault for being careless. After returning from the magic tower, he added an identification tag to his introduction. He didn't expect this to be publicly available information. Since then, he has been receiving constant job recruitment calls. The male lead was already annoyed by them, so he directly hung up. He was just too tired right now. He couldn't even be bothered to respond. Suddenly, his phone vibrated again. The male lead picked it up to see. What is this again? Then he saw a chocolate advertisement pop up. It even said to meet you at the convenience store. The male lead, who had never seen these things, I thought it was specially for him. So he walked alone to the convenience store late at night, even though he felt dead tired right now. But just thinking that this was prepared especially for him, it would be too rude not to check it out. But before he could walk too far, he found that a van was blocking the way ahead. The male lead walked up to take a look, not understanding why someone parked here. How rude. But he didn't notice that there were two people in the car staring at him with ill intentions. Then, just as the male lead turned to find another way, a man suddenly rushed out of the car, followed by a wave of sneak attacks. The sudden incident left the male lead very confused. Even though he struggled with all his might, he couldn't break free no matter what. Just like that, his consciousness gradually faded into a blur. He didn't know how long he was unconscious. When he woke up, he was already tied up. His eyes were covered with a black cloth. He didn't know what the situation was now. At this moment, he only felt that the world was a terrifying place. He had just arrived not long ago and was already kidnapped. Just then, a conversation suddenly entered the male lead's ears. Is this guy the F-class? Yes, we found an opportunity to capture him. From their conversation, the male lead could analyze that this was not an accident, but rather premeditated. Just as the two continued chatting, their boss arrived. The boss immediately had the two pay their respects, because in front of them was their VIP client. Then he had his underlings check the goods. The client Will wants to see at this time. The male lead suddenly realized that he was the goods. Originally, the male lead was someone else's goods. But seeing the male lead's VIP client, he slowly grinned. Then he reminded the others. This tied-up guy seems to be waking up. The male lead, who clearly hadn't moved at all, didn't understand why he was exposed. But before he could figure it out, the other party stepped forward and ripped off the black cloth covering the male lead's eyes. Then, a familiar figure appeared in front of the male lead. It was the S-rank hunter, Zhang Changhao. Zhang Changhao said with interest, "Long time no see." Seeing that the male lead seemed to still be confused, Zhang Changhao kindly explained to him. It turned out that he had broken the magic tower maze, so he had recently become very famous in the circle. And coincidentally, this high-level appraiser's hunter rank is S rank. Thus, with such weak combat power, but possessing such high appraisal skills, the male lead naturally became the target of criminals. And the male lead's fate from here on is easy to guess, which is to be sold to a wealthy person as a private appraiser. After all, many people do not want others to know what high-level equipment they have. However, the fees for appraisers are generally very high. But as a slave, the maintenance costs are much cheaper. Moreover, people below D rank are easily brainwashed. It's very convenient to use. Zhang Changhao stated that he had done this before. That's why he became a VIP guest here. After explaining, Zhang Changhao coldly walked past the male lead. The male lead hurriedly asked if he was willing to help. However, Zhang Changhao stated that he is a guest. He has other matters to attend to. He waved his hand and took his leave. Looking at the arrogant kidnapper in front of him, the male lead felt regret. At the beginning, I shouldn't have been reborn into this damn world. Soon, the male lead was thrown into a room on the second floor. They were making space for the next merchandise. At this moment, one of them reminded that they hadn't put a blindfold on this guy. Another person said it didn't matter. He would definitely fall asleep anyway. After saying that, the door slowly closed. However, in their eyes, the male lead, who was supposed to be asleep, opened his eyes. The male lead didn't understand why they threw him here alone. Aren't they planning to sell him right away? Just as he was pondering this, a faint floral scent suddenly entered his nose. Following the direction of the scent, he looked over and saw a special magical item quietly placed on the table. It was a tool that induced sleep. Even B-rank awakeners couldn't escape it. However, for the male lead, a great magician, it was completely useless. Of course, that wasn't important. What mattered was that he had to escape from here first. The male lead struggled to untie his shoelaces, biting one end and stepping on the other end. Then he began to rub against the bandages that bound his hands, frantically. In the end, hard work pays off, and he successfully freed his hands. Next, the first thing the male lead needed to do was call the police. After all, even if he was immune to brainwashing, being sold was still very dangerous. But after searching for a long time, he found no phone. Thinking about it, it's normal. How could the kidnappers make such a mistake? At this moment, the male lead couldn't help but look to the side at the magical item that could induce coma. Then he stepped forward to pick it up. Sure enough, if he wanted to escape, this was the only thing he could use. The man only said because of his leg injury. Have you ever seen me run? Who would have thought that he successfully intimidated an S-rank hunter? Not long ago, the unfortunate male lead was kidnapped. The kidnappers tied him up with the hypnotic magical item and locked him in a room. At this moment, two lackeys were guarding outside a corridor. The two were originally doing nothing. However, they suddenly felt something intense. They turned around abruptly. As a result, they saw a golden light rising behind them. At the same time, a fragrance wafted out. Seeing this, the two hurriedly covered their mouths and noses. They stood ready. Before they could figure out what was happening, suddenly, something like a meteor hammer hit one of them hard in the face. At this moment, the other person finally realized something. Unfortunately, it was already too late. A strong drowsiness swept over his entire body. Then the male lead was seen walking out the door with the magical item. I have to say, this thing is quite useful. Fearing being discovered, the male lead prepared to immediately look for an exit. Just then, his foot suddenly kicked something. Bending down to look, it turned out to be a phone. What a stroke of luck! The male lead immediately pressed the emergency call number to report. Soon the call connected. A voice came from the other end, asking what had happened. Hearing this, the male lead immediately stated that he had been kidnapped, requesting rescue. However, it seemed like the other end couldn't hear anything. They kept asking him to speak louder. But no matter how much the male lead raised his voice, the sound remained the same. This made the male lead wonder, is this phone broken? Since the call couldn't go through, a text message should work, right? The text message was sent successfully, but the reply was very mechanical. Message received. It may take some time to arrive. The situation is urgent. Please dial 112. He sent another message. but still got the same result. This made the male lead a bit uneasy. Did the other end receive my text message? Just in case. He sent another text message to Enruishing, and then picked up the magical tool to begin his escape journey. At this moment, there are two other traffickers patrolling this level, but they suddenly noticed something was off. Why is it so foggy ahead? At the same time, a blonde walked out from the mist. Who is this? Is there a dyed-haired guy among them? But the male lead doesn't wait for them to figure it out. He once again spun the magical tool like a meteor hammer. Then he suddenly swung it towards them. One person was thrown away. The next second, that person was slapped in the face. This accuracy is indeed impressive. At this moment, another person finally reacted. This guy is the awakened one they kidnapped. However, it was already too late. The male lead retracted the magical tool through the chain and directly pressed it against the other person's face. Another double kill achievement unlocked. The magical tool for slapping faces is indeed useful. Next, he needs to find an exit to escape quickly. But, in this building, where even the windows are blocked, it is indeed a bit difficult. And just at this moment, the male lead suddenly got startled, because he felt a huge magical power coming from behind. This feeling is like an empty door. Thinking that an empty door is usually on a mountain or in an open outdoor area. The male lead decided to use it as a landmark to escape. But before he could take any action, a group of people appeared behind him. It seems that the escape plan has been exposed. The male lead hurriedly ran down the stairs to the next floor. Unexpectedly, at this critical moment, his legs suddenly started to ache violently. This made the male lead break out in a cold sweat. Damn it, I haven't even started running yet. And in just this moment, the people behind had already caught up. They each pointed angrily at the male lead. A mere F rank actually dares to run, really asking for death. However, when they saw what the male lead was holding, they all showed expressions of terror. They hurriedly held their breath. And the male lead said it was too late to realize now. Saying this, he once again swung the magical tool like a meteor hammer. But this time, the male lead miscalculated. One of the people had a higher level and caught it with one hand. Then he charged at the male lead fiercely and pressed the male lead hard against the wall with one hand. At this moment, he no longer cared about the rule of not being able to lay hands on goods, and was going to give the male lead a taste of his own medicine. Who would have thought the male lead would grab the other person's arm? Then he forcefully kneed them in the chin, causing the person to roll their eyes and fall straight back to the ground, looking at the knocked out guy and the others who were also knocked out. The male lead couldn't help but feel utterly exhausted. After resting for a while, the male lead picked up the magical tool from the ground, only to realize that the situation was a bit dire, because the magical tool's own power had already been depleted. If he got chased down again, it would be troublesome. And just at that moment, the male lead suddenly noticed a door behind him. The immense magical power was emanating from behind the door. There was definitely an empty door behind this door. It must be the exit. Finally seeing hope, the male lead threw away the now useless magical tool and shakily walked towards the door. Fortunately, it wasn't locked. With an excited heart, he pushed the door open, only to be dumbfounded by the scene before him. He saw Zhang Changhao and a group of people in front of him. What's going on? How is there an empty door indoors? And with Zhang Changhao here? It's over. At this moment, the boss, seeing the goods escaping, was very angry. He angrily scolded his underlings about their management. And the scolded underling questioned the male lead. How did you end up here? What did you do to the people above? Did you really take down so many people by yourself? You wouldn't be falsely reporting your level, would you? Seeing that the other party hadn't noticed him, the male lead used the magical tool to knock those people out. He originally planned to bluff and escape. But unfortunately, with Zhang Changhao present, that was doomed to fail. And worse still, the boss of the human trafficking gang shamelessly requested Zhang Changhao to take action. To this, the male lead could only look down on him. As if a VIP would help you, that's ridiculous. Who would have thought Zhang Changhao would actually grin and agree, just like that? As a thank you, the boss said he could sell the male lead cheaply to Zhang Changhao. Then Zhang Changhao in front of the male lead and said, "Did you hear that? He said he would sell you cheaply. What do you think? Are you planning to escape now? There's a road behind you. If you run for your life, I'll let you go this time." However, the male lead's next words left the other party stunned. "Zhang Changhao, have you ever seen me run?" Hearing this, Zhang Changhao looked at him seriously. "Not once. This is the most unfortunate space-type awakener who went offline in less than 30 seconds. Just now." The male lead's question, "Have you ever seen me run?" intimidated Zhang Changhao. Once he reacted, Zhang Changhao looked at him with fighting spirit. "Then let's have a contest here." Who would have thought the male lead would directly raise his hand in surrender? "No, we don't need to fight here." Hearing this, Zhang Changhao looked down at the male lead. "You knocked out all the people above and came here. How can I believe your surrender?" The other party's concern. That's right, if it were the male lead, he wouldn't easily believe it either. Just as the male lead was thinking about what to do next, he suddenly felt a surge of magic power. He and Zhang Changhao turned their heads to the side at the same time. As a result, they saw a man walking out of a spatial passage. At first, the male lead thought this was an empty door. But then, he realized it was not right. It wasn't an empty door, but a magical passage. A space movement skill. The newcomer approached to greet their boss. At this moment, Zhang Changhao stepped forward to ask, "Is this the mover?" The boss proudly introduced to Zhang Changhao. "He has a space movement skill that can transport people. He's a rare sorcerer." Hearing this, Zhang Changhao grinned. "I didn't expect to see the real deal." Likewise, the boss also introduced Zhang Changhao to the mover. A few people were chatting excitedly when the neglected male lead suddenly thought about taking this opportunity to escape. Who would have thought that Zhang Changhao would suddenly pick up the moment the mover was about to shake his hand? With all his strength, he delivered a heavy punch to the opponent's neck, sending him flying away. The sudden scene shocked the male lead, and the boss of the human trafficking organization had a grim expression as he questioned Zhang Changhao about what he was doing. However, Zhang Changhao, who had just been very enthusiastic, now looked at the few people as if they were ants. It turned out that his long-term goal was to take down this guy. He had spent a lot of time gaining the trust of these people. After all, space awakeners are just too slippery. At the slightest disturbance, they would immediately run away. It's hard to find an opportunity. As the saying goes, a strategist enters the game himself, winning half the battle. In this round, Zhang Changhao won. Meanwhile, the male lead looked on in confusion, not understanding what was happening. In fact, Zhang Changhao didn't care whether these guys were smuggling or illegally occupying land. But these people smuggling awakeners overseas was a different matter altogether. Realizing that things were going badly, the little brother urged the boss to quickly escape through the spatial door. However, what responded to him was Zhang Changhao's merciless punch. The male lead calmly watched from the side. And sure enough, no one could stop this guy. S-rank is not something that comes easily. At first, the level set by the Hunter Association was only from F to A. But suddenly, one day, one after another, hunters with terrifying powers far beyond level 1 appeared. This super spec level was ultimately classified as S rank. Undoubtedly, they are at the top of the food chain on Earth. In the blink of an eye, only the boss of the human trafficking organization remained conscious. He trembled and begged Zhang Changhao to spare him. However, Zhang Changhao was not some kind-hearted person. How could such an absurd request be agreed to? Listening to the screams coming from nearby, the male lead realized again that he really shouldn't have provoked this guy. Just then, the male lead and Zhang Changhao suddenly froze because a siren was heard coming from outside. The police officer Zhang Changhao looked at the male lead in panic. "You called the police?" The male lead suddenly remembered that this was indeed the case, so he nodded in acknowledgement. Upon hearing this, Zhang Changhao had a look of disbelief, as if he had seen something unbelievable in society. "You actually called the police?" The male lead completely didn't understand what the problem was. Soon, Zhang Changhao calmed down. He explained that he was here just to stop these guys from selling awakened ones abroad. He reminded the male lead not to get himself mixed up with this organization. The male lead replied that this was what the police were supposed to do. Hearing the word police, Zhang Changhao was very dissatisfied. "You have no idea how slow these guys usually are. Under normal circumstances, even if you call the police, it would take at least a few days to find the place. I don't know why they are so fast this time." Regarding this, Zhang Changhao thought the male lead had done something in advance. Although he was very curious, now was not the time to say much. He patted the male lead on the shoulder, then left without looking back. Seeing this, the male lead was shocked. He told him to wait a moment, but Zhang Changhao seemed to hear nothing. The male lead cursed under his breath. How was he supposed to explain the situation to the police alone? Soon, a large number of police officers rushed in. Then they treated the male lead as the prime suspect. They immediately took him into custody. Next, they warned the male lead not to use his abilities and questioned where the hostage was. Although the male lead explained that he was the one who reported the case, they didn't believe him at all. The male lead was speechless about this. Is it really okay to treat a kind alien like this? At this critical moment, an angelic voice suddenly entered the male lead's ears. Just then, Miss Zuan Yuyan rushed in, panting. Looking at the male lead who was being arrested, Zuan Yuyan stepped forward to confirm that he was indeed the one who reported it. This time, the police had no doubts at all. They believed him right away. They uncuffed the male lead, apologizing as well. The male lead just wanted to shout, "Didn't I say so?" However, the male lead was very curious why Zuan Yuyan was here. Zuan Yuyan then raised her phone to show them. It turned out that An Runsheng received the male lead's distress text, but he was on his way to suppress a dungeon riot, too busy to split his attention, so he handed this matter over to Zhu Yuyan. Then, Zhu Yuyan found this place using his tracking skills. No wonder the police arrived so quickly. Just as Zhu Yuyan was explaining, a loud shout suddenly came from the side. It turned out the police discovered through comparison that these people were all wanted human traffickers. They were part of a recently prominent organization, selling awakened individuals overseas. This place seemed to be their meeting spot. Upon hearing this, Zuan Yuyan was shocked. She had heard that this organization was very difficult to track, and now, it seemed like this organization was almost wiped out. At this moment, the police captain approached the male lead. "Did you do all of this?" The male lead immediately denied it, saying it wasn't him. It was all that madman Zhang Changhao's doing. The captain looked at him with disbelief. "There are so many people lying here. Wasn't it you who did it?" The male lead was sweating, saying, "Those were my doing." The captain told the male lead to clarify. With no other choice, the male lead had to tell the truth. He had a cold and proud expression. "Actually, I did all of this to protect myself." At this moment, another police officer picked up the magical item the male lead had thrown away. He asked if it belonged to the male lead. Meanwhile, Zhu Yuyan fell into deep thought. That being said, this guy wasn't tied up. And he appeared in the boss's room. Plus, he was the one who reported it. Looking at the other person's uninjured body, even with the near sale overseas, he still had a nonchalant attitude. Zhu Yuyan couldn't help but feel suspicious. Was he really kidnapped? Could it be that all of this was within his plan from the beginning? The man finally used the first magic after coming to Earth. And the first thing he did was to restore his limp. With the human trafficking incident over, the male lead, as the meat ticket, successfully sent the entire organization down. At the same time, he also gained considerable rewards. He got a B-class hypnotic magical item for free. The reason for this was that the police didn't know the effect of this item, mistaking the male lead as its owner. This type of magical item is very rare, and it can be charged for use. The male lead was quite satisfied with this. Although due to Zhang Changhao's escape, he had to deal with the police's statements alone. But it was all worth it. The only regret was that this item could only be used on humans, and had no effect on animals or monsters. Just then, with the sound of meditation, the male lead excitedly turned around to look. He saw a stream of green steam rising from the kettle. He hurriedly went to turn off the gas stove, and then, with an excited heart, poured the boiling water directly into the cup. It worked. The color was perfect. He carefully admired his creation. He didn't expect to make this on such a remote planet. Indeed, he was a rare talent. It turned out that this green liquid was a magic power enhancer. As long as you drink it, it can temporarily increase magic power. Just like a lighter's flint, it can provide the initial energy. The male lead raised the cup and drank it all in one go. Then he carefully sensed the changes in his body, breathing very well and smoothly. Although the effect of this potion only lasts for 5 minutes, it is enough to complete a sorcerer. Then the male lead used his first magic after coming to Earth. He first restored his right leg's injury. Then he cast a spell to maintain his health and suppress aging. The magic ended. The male lead jumped up and down excitedly. Sure enough, it didn't hurt at all. But now, he couldn't celebrate too early. Because he just confirmed one thing. That is, the magic power of this body is really poor. Just using a low-level magic drained all the magic power. The magic power conversion efficiency of this body is too low. He can't use the amplifier frequently. But thinking positively, at least this time it was successful, right? Good news lifts the spirit. He should eat something to celebrate. The male lead was about to see what was left in the fridge, when suddenly, he heard a knock at the door. At first, he thought it was Zhuan Yuyan again. Who would have thought that when he opened the door, it was an old man? Through the original body's memories, the male lead recalled that this was the landlord. He hurriedly greeted the old man. And the old man first apologized for the intrusion, then politely asked the male lead, "Isn't the rent for this month due yet?" It turned out that the original owner hadn't paid rent for over 3 months, owing a total of 1.35 million won. If you add in utilities and other miscellaneous fees, at least 2 million won is needed. Yet the old man actually let the male lead stay until the end of the month. If he really can't pay, he can vacate the place. He had never seen such a good landlord in his life. He was lucky to have once received a full deposit refund. He was almost moved to tears. After sending off the landlord, the male lead returned to his room with a worried expression. Oh no, he was about to be homeless. There were only 14 days left until the end of the month. Was there any way to make money? Preferably something buried in the ground and forgotten. Thinking of this, the male lead suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He suddenly lunged for his phone. That's right, there's that. Then he made a call to Zhang Changhao. He wanted to get back the compensation that belonged to him. Zhang Changhao, who was enjoying a feast, received the male lead's call. After thinking for a while, he remembered the traffic accident. Then he didn't waste any words. He directly asked the male lead how much he needed. The male lead checked online. He saw someone say to start asking for 300. Then he thought about needing 2 million. And the other party still owed him quite a bit. Asking for a little more shouldn't be a problem. Not hearing a reply, Zhang Changhao said, "If you don't speak, I'm hanging up." Hearing this, the male lead hurriedly asked if 3 million was okay. At that moment, Zhang Changhao felt underestimated. A mere 3 million. You actually asked me if it was okay. After hanging up the phone, he immediately transferred 3 million to the other party. The male lead excitedly looked at the notification of the deposit. He actually got such a large sum of money so easily. But soon he calmed down again. Because after paying the rent, there wasn't much left. Thinking of this, the male lead couldn't help but shed tears. Is there any way for an ordinary person to make money quickly? Just then, a call came in. The male lead saw it was in Yunsung, thinking he hadn't thanked him for the previous matter. Could it be that he was worried and contacted me first? Just as the male lead was about to answer the phone, he suddenly thought of something important. It seems like in a class hunter. In the next dungeon, he could earn billions. Thinking of the way to make money, the male lead decisively arranged to meet in Yunsung. First of all, he thanked in Yunsung for contacting Zhu and Yuyan to save his life. As a token of gratitude, the male lead said he would treat in Yunsung to a meal. Hearing that the big brother was treating, and Yunsung was very excited. Then, to save the male lead money, he only ordered a cup of coffee. The male lead superficially agreed with pleasure, but internally he was full of disdain. You might as well have dinner with me. Now, just the smell of coffee makes him want to vomit. Then in Yunsung ordered an iced coffee. The male lead ordered a latte, and emphasized that he only wanted the latte, no coffee. No coffee flavored items, and Yunsung listened with a puzzled expression. And the waiter, sweating profusely, said, "I'll do my best." The male lead looked on in confusion at the strange reactions of the two beside him. What's wrong? Have I revealed my alien side? In the end, the male lead finally got to drink a latte without coffee. The two started with some small talk to lighten the mood. Then the male lead got straight to the point. Run Sheng. It seems like you've only been doing suppression dungeon raids lately, right? Aside from those few times with me. How long has it been since you entered a void gate? Upon hearing this, and Runsheng started stammering and couldn't speak. The male lead looked at him seriously. Are you really afraid of entering a void gate? He is clearly from a magical civilization, the top grand mage on the planet. Yet now, he has fallen to the point of being unable to pay rent. He can only rely on tricking his underlings to fight monsters and pick up scraps to survive. To solve the problem of survival, the male lead arranged to meet his little fan, and Runsheng. Then he got straight to the point and asked the other person, "Are you afraid of entering the dungeon?" And in Runsheng's answer was just as he expected. He can't enter the dungeon for the time being. The male lead understood this very well. After all, suddenly encountering a high-level monster, and then being betrayed by a companion. The fear of brushing past death. For a college student just over 20 years old, it's just too cruel. But Runsheng, you can't always follow me, an S-rank hunter. The male lead looked at him seriously. You need to form your own team, or prepare to become a lone wolf. After hearing the male lead's words, and Runsheng's expression instantly fell. He thought the male lead was going to abandon him. However, the male lead is not an idiot. How could he possibly push away a free ride? He took a sip of his latte without coffee. He continued, "If you're willing, I want to train you. I can guide you on how to use your magic and skills. What do you think?" Upon hearing this, and Runsheng instantly became excited. Is this true? Of course, I'm willing. Seeing the big fish so easily hooked, the male lead was extremely excited inside. I really am a genius. Since a decision has been made, they immediately began searching for a suitable dungeon. Not far from the caf, a D-rank dungeon. The ancient Roman temple is the best choice, because the drop rate here is very low. So it's an unpopular dungeon. But precisely because of this, it's just right for training. Before officially starting, the male lead asked In Runsheng to demonstrate his main skill first. Upon hearing this, In Runsheng first calmed his nervousness, then used his main ability, the Guardian Shield. This is a defense made entirely of magic power. The more magic power consumed, the stronger the defense. And Runsheng cautiously asked the male lead how it was. The male lead stared at the shield in silence for a moment, then posed a question, why only block in front? And Runsheng didn't understand why he asked that. Because the skill has always been like this since awakening. The male lead seemed to understand. The other party was like a gorilla using a tool for the first time. Completely clueless. So he decided to start teaching from understanding the skill. First, there's this shield. The skill is meant to protect the whole body, not just block in front. However, And Runsheng simply couldn't understand. Although his shield could enlarge, it couldn't change shape. To this, the male lead was almost infuriated. You fool. Then he had In Runsheng try again, and guided him to treat his chest as the center of the skill. Unfold the spherical magic like a crystal ball. And Runsheng tried this method, but it still didn't work. The male lead patted his shoulder and encouraged him to continue, reminding him to firmly remember the image he wanted in his mind. Seeing the male lead's serious expression, And Runsheng also regained his spirits. Thus, through one difficult attempt after another, And Runsheng finally successfully released the spherical shield. He was very excited to have succeeded for the first time. However, he had only taken a step, and the shield shattered loudly. Seeing this, And Runsheng instantly became dejected. But the male lead said it was okay, because as long as he succeeded once, the next step was just to increase proficiency. And Runsheng was very grateful for the male lead's help. He had never thought of this before. I can use my skills like this. The male lead told him that skills can change according to the user's thoughts. The caster's thoughts have a significant impact on the magic power. So those who are a bit vain and arrogant have a higher chance of becoming great magicians. Just like me, this genius. Just when the male lead's little vanity was overflowing, And Runsheng suddenly spoke up, asking what training to do next. The male lead said they would proceed to practical training. Only by frequently using skills against monsters can one quickly improve proficiency. Thus, And Runsheng began to solo small monsters. In battle after battle, his spherical shield became increasingly proficient. He finally reached a level where it wouldn't shatter even while moving. The male lead cheered him on from the side, saying he was doing well. And indeed, he was a class with overwhelming combat power. Besides that, the male lead had more important things to do. That is to pick up dropped crystal equipment. These can all be sold for money. Using training skills as an excuse, he picked up small equipment dropped by level hunters, also known as stealing others' loot. This is the meaning of teaching. Before long, the male lead had picked up a bag of magic crystals. This is enough for a month's living expenses, compared to directly borrowing money from In Runsheng, or repeatedly asking him for help in fighting monsters. This method is obviously better. Otherwise, if he upset a level hunter, he would be in big trouble. After secretly picking up the equipment, the male lead asked In Runsheng how it was going, if he had grasped the essentials. However, In Runsheng's reaction made the male lead feel a bit strange. The male lead felt quite guilty about this. Could it be that he noticed my little actions? The man had just found a quick way to get rich. only to have it abruptly cut off by an acquaintance. All because he took shortcuts, violating relevant regulations. And Runsheng had never felt a sense of awe in his life. Whether it was a mentor during his student days, or a star praised on television, he only felt a slight sense of emotion, that there are such amazing people in the world. But today, and Runsheng finally understood the meaning of this term. This is simply incomprehensible. Just by watching his skills once, he inferred their hidden uses. Moreover, the other person's teaching was as natural as breathing. He had never even heard of the ability to discover others' hidden skills. But the other party was clearly not an analyzer, awakener. If he closed his eyes, he could still see someone calmly taking out the heart of a level 1 golem. So all of this was thanks to the other party's keen insight and rich knowledge. Big Brother is indeed not an ordinary person. At this moment, and Runsheng was filled with a sense of awe, just as Runsheng was in shock. The male lead's voice suddenly reached his ears. Runsheng, what's wrong? Have you started to grasp the tricks now? At this moment, and Runsheng felt very embarrassed. In the face of Big Brother's careful teaching, he hadn't even mastered a single skill. Then he bowed and apologized to the male lead. I'm sorry. I will practice to perfection as soon as possible. He thought the male lead would feel disappointed. But who would have thought? The male lead calmly said, Runsheng, don't worry, if you don't do well today, you can come back tomorrow or the day after. Anyway, I'm just an F rank. There's plenty of time. At this moment, the male lead's figure in Runsheng's eyes was so tall. When he was losing confidence, not only did he teach without hesitation, but he was even afraid of burdening himself to say such an obvious lie. And Runsheng secretly vowed to repay this kindness. Then he asked the male lead if there was anything he wanted, or if there was anything he needed to do. Hearing this, the male lead, covered in cold sweat, said he really didn't need anything. This answer, as in Runsheng expected, the older brother is just that selfless. He wouldn't be like those people in modern society who are tempted by a little bit of money. When he awakened his rank ability back then, he thought he could do anything. Now, he realizes how naive he was. Having understood this, and Runsheng no longer forced himself. Today, let's do as the older brother said. And stop here for now. Then he happily told the male lead, let's go back. At this moment, the older brother had already made a decision to work hard to improve himself, and one day help the older brother. Unlike Ruishing, who had already completed his self-strategy, the male lead looked guilty. Why did he ask me if I wanted anything? Did he sense something? But judging by his performance, it seems he has no interest in these things at all. Perhaps for a rank hunter, these are simply not worth mentioning. If that's the case, then next, can we enter a higher level gate? Thinking about this, the male lead felt excited. Moreover, today's gains are already enough for the next rent. With anticipation in his heart, he prepared to go back and treat himself to something good. And this good mood lasted until the two walked out of the gate, because an unexpected person appeared in front of them. The male lead didn't understand why Zuan Yuyan would be here. While Zuan Yuyan first looked at his watch, then spoke, hello. And Runsheng, you came out quite late. It was just a D rank gate after all. He originally came here to notify and run society about something. But now, there's a question. He looked seriously at the male lead. Why is a D rank here? Clearly just now, he was suspected of falsely reporting his rank, and is being reassessed. As a result, once he got rid of the suspicion, he illegally entered an empty gate. At this moment, the male lead was sweating profusely. Damn, I can't believe I'm blocked at the door. Then he immediately explained. He entered as a porter. He was helping Runsheng pick up things. And Runsheng also testified for the male lead. Zuan Yuyan didn't believe it at all. Stop making excuses. How much can you fit in that kind of backpack? Of course, and Runsheng didn't escape a lecture either. Assisting in illegally entering an empty gate is also a violation. Although that's the way it is. The male lead still wanted to struggle a bit. He pointed out that the association had no restrictions on porters. But Zuan Yuyan showed no mercy at all. Because it is meant for real porters, and not for some people to take advantage of. He looked seriously at the male lead. You just don't understand. Such behavior will only invite more suspicion. You should know that. Ordinary F-rank hunters wouldn't easily violate the rules. After all, their lives are very precious. So this disregard for rank will definitely raise suspicions. Zuan Yuyan asked them to cooperate. The male lead helplessly expressed his understanding. And in Runsheng, who had just vowed to become stronger with the male lead, almost cried. All along, Zuan Yuyan has been too lenient with the male lead, to the point where he almost forgot that this girl in front of him has an awakening level of B rank. She can tear a lion apart with her bare hands. Therefore, getting angry is not beneficial to anyone. In the end, Zhu Yuyan just warned them. Then she asked in Runsheng to go with her. She has a notification about the area changes that in Runsheng is responsible for suppressing. Notification of area changes. Thus, with tears in his eyes, and Runsheng waved goodbye to the male lead. Watching the two leave, the male lead understood that the way to make money just now probably wouldn't work. But it's not a big deal, because he had already prepared plan B. And just after the male lead turned around, Zhu Yuyan quietly glanced back. What a mysterious man. The first thing the male lead did when he woke up the next day was to lie in bed and scroll through his phone. Collecting hunter information through his phone had already become a habit for him. This time he received a useful piece of information. An item had finally completed its analysis. This bracelet is called the Twin Guardian Angel. It first appeared in that X-level dungeon. The male lead had kept it all along. He originally planned to return it to Zheng Shenyu. But after such a long time, the other party probably doesn't need it anymore. Today, the male lead wore it for the first time. It fit perfectly with his wrist. The reason he put it on is that today's experiment is a bit dangerous. The male lead arrived alone at an empty portal. He never thought that one day he would be so nervous without a bodyguard. Even though this is the lowest level F-class portal, portals are generally divided into red and blue types. This is a type of blue portal. There are no bosses inside. In the vast area, small monsters will continuously appear. Once a certain number of monsters are defeated, the portal will close. Here, even the male lead can come and go freely. It's a good practice area. He came today to farm monsters. Although due to Zhu Yuyan's warning, the quick money-making method was blocked. It's okay. After all, defeating these F-class monsters can still earn some living expenses. He is clearly a magic civilization, the top mage on the planet. Now, he has fallen to the point of almost being killed by a sheep. To make money, the male lead entered alone the F-class portal that matched his level. What appeared before him was a blue sky and white clouds, and an endless grassland. Not far from him, a group of monsters was quietly grazing. They are the native residents here. The malfunctioning goats are named this way because the sounds they make are like a violin with a broken string. Don't be fooled by their gentle appearance. They are among the most dangerous of F-class monsters, so they are also quite valuable. With this thought in mind, the male lead opened the bottle containing the magic power enhancer and drank its contents in one gulp. Then, he felt a long-lost power spread throughout his body. Powerful magic surrounded him, which undoubtedly attracted the attention of the monsters. But it was already too late. Because the male lead's casting speed was faster than anyone else's, he extended his index finger. A small flame formed at his fingertip. Then this flame shot out like a bullet. And it grew larger, gradually forming a fireball radiating high temperatures. The male lead calmly watched this scene turn to ashes. As the male lead's words fell, the fireball got closer to its target. It looked like it could really burn it to death. However, just as the fireball made contact with the target, it suddenly disappeared into thin air. This scene completely caught the male lead off guard, so much so that he momentarily didn't know how to react. And the goat, which was attacked for no reason, slowly began to emit a wisp of black smoke from its forehead. This made him feel angry. He saw its veins bulging instantly. White smoke spewed from its nostrils. It was clearly in a state of not stopping until it was dead. It charged straight at the male lead. Seeing this, the male lead was almost scared to death. A scream escaped his mouth. He complained while running, "Damn it. I knew it would be like this. F-class magic is indeed useless." He looked back while running, fearing that in the next moment, he would be hit with a surprise attack and not even know it. Why is this guy running so fast? Fortunately, just before he was caught, he passed through an empty door. The male lead, who successfully escaped, looked back, panting. Fortunately, the monster did not follow him out. He was breathing heavily. This body was worse than he had imagined. After running for just a short while, he almost collapsed from exhaustion. Just as the male lead caught his breath, he heard a voice enter his ears. He turned around to look. He saw a strange man, looking at him with an excited expression. "It's you, right? Long time no see." The male lead was very puzzled by this. It seemed like he was seeing this guy for the first time. And the other party, being familiar, grabbed the male lead's hand and explained, "It turns out we participated in the hunter qualification exam together." Although the male lead had no impression of him. As they talked, more and more fragments appeared in his mind, which meant that the other party was indeed someone the original owner knew before. He did not continue to speak, but decided to observe the situation first. Meanwhile, the other party rambled on and on, showing no signs of stopping. This made the male lead feel a bit irritated. Does this guy even realize that he is standing in front of an alien disguised as a human? In the end, the other party expressed that meeting was fate, and invited the male lead to team up. Today, they just happened to be one person short. After saying that, he pointed in a direction where his teammate was. In the direction he pointed, there were 3 fully armed hunters. One of them had the strongest magic power, a guy carrying an axe. Who was the captain of this team? A D-rank hunter asked the male lead how he was doing. If he agreed, they could enter the dungeon right away. For a weak hunter, there's no more effective strategy than group hunting. However, the male lead chose to refuse, because he had already used up today's magic enhancer. Who would have thought that even when he spoke the truth, that his magic was depleted? The person opposite him showed no signs of wavering. "That's okay. After all, we weren't looking for hunters." It turned out they were short of a porter to help pick things up, and they could offer a very high daily wage. Upon hearing that just helping to carry things would earn him money, the male lead instantly became excited. He felt this proposal was good, as he could take this opportunity to join an ordinary hunter team, and then see how they hunted. But he didn't notice the sinister and crafty expression on the man's face beside him. The male lead ultimately accepted the proposal, following the few people back into the dungeon. Then he stood by, watching the battle with great interest for 3 hours. This team coordinated very well. Everyone was in their position, playing an important role. It was simple, comfortable, and safe. Like skilled primitive people hunting a mammoth. After the hunt was completed, the captain took the package from the male lead's hands. He generously praised the male lead for doing well. Much better than their irresponsible porter. Saying this, he pulled out a stack of cash, counting it in front of the male lead, and then handed it to the male lead. The male lead felt a bit embarrassed, because this was a bit too high for a porter. But the captain laughed heartily and said, "This is what you deserve." Saying this, he also asked the male lead if he was free tomorrow. After all, finding a new porter was quite troublesome. He invited the male lead to continue joining them. However, while saying this, his gaze was firmly fixed on the twin guardian angel on the male lead's wrist.